Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Cole Briggs, and I've been running long-haul routes for 17 years now. 17 years of asphalt, diesel fumes, and the steady hum of 18 wheels beneath me. I've seen every kind of road this country has to offer. Interstates that stretch into infinity, mountain passes that make your hands sweat on the wheel, desert highways where the heat makes the air shimmer like water. I've driven through blizzards in Wyoming, thunderstorms in Oklahoma, fog so thick in Washington that I couldn't see my own hood ornament. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on Route 83 in northern Nebraska back in October of 2019. I need to tell this story because it still doesn't make sense to me. Even now, years later, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. My wife says I should talk to someone, maybe a therapist or something. But how do you explain something that shouldn't be possible? How do you tell someone about something that, according to every record and every piece of evidence, never actually happened the way I remember it? Let me start at the beginning. It was a Tuesday night, around 9:30 in the evening. I'd picked up a load of agricultural equipment in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, pumps and irrigation parts, nothing special. The delivery was scheduled for a farm supply warehouse outside of North Platte, Nebraska. A simple run, maybe 4.5 hours if I kept a steady pace. I'd done this route dozens of times before. It was one of those drives where you could practically do it in your sleep, which is a dangerous way to think. But after 17 years, some roads just become part of your muscle memory. The weather was clear that night. I remember that specifically because I'd checked the forecast 3 times before leaving. October in that part of the country can be unpredictable. One day you've got perfect blue skies, the next you're driving through an early snowstorm that shuts down half the state. But that Tuesday was perfect. Temperature in the low 50s, no wind to speak of, visibility for miles. The kind of night where driving actually feels peaceful instead of like work. I left Sioux Falls just after the sun went down. The sky was that deep purple color it gets right before full dark, with the last streaks of orange fading on the western horizon. I had my CB radio on, listening to other drivers chatter back and forth. Mostly, it was the usual stuff. Warnings about speed traps, complaints about dispatch, somebody asking about a good place to eat near exit 212. Normal trucker talk. It's actually comforting, in a weird way. Reminds you that you're not completely alone out here. My phone was fully charged and sitting in the holder on my dashboard. I'd already called my wife, Linda, to let her know I was on the road and would probably be home by 2 or 3 in the morning. She wasn't happy about the late arrival, but she understood. She's been a trucker's wife for 12 years now. She knows how it works. The first hour was completely routine. I merged onto Highway 81 South, then caught Route 20 heading west. The traffic was light, mostly just me and a few other semis scattered across the highway. Every now and then a car would pass, but for the most part, it was just the road and the darkness and the sound of my engine. I'd been driving for about an hour and 15 minutes when I decided to take Route 83 South instead of staying on Route 20. It wasn't the route my GPS had calculated, but it was actually a bit shorter, and I knew the road well. Route 83 is one of those long, straight highways that cuts right through the middle of farm country. During the day, you can see for miles in every direction. Nothing but fields and the occasional farmhouse. At night, though, it's different. At night, it's just your headlights and the yellow line, and the feeling that you're driving through an ocean of darkness. I made the turn onto Route 83 around 10:45. I remember checking my phone to see what time it was because I was calculating whether I'd make it to North Platte before midnight. The phone showed full signal strength, 5 bars, and the GPS was tracking perfectly. Everything was normal. The first sign that something was wrong came about 20 minutes later. I was cruising along at a steady 65, listening to the CB, when suddenly the radio crackled with static. It wasn't unusual, CB radios do that sometimes, especially in rural areas. But this was different. It was a sharp, harsh burst of white noise that made me wince and reach for the volume knob. I turned it down, waited a few seconds, then turned it back up. The static was gone, replaced by the normal chatter of other drivers. Probably just drove under a power line or something, I said out loud to myself. That's another thing you do when you drive alone for hours. You talk to yourself. It helps break up the monotony. But then it happened again. Another burst of static, this time longer, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. It completely drowned out whatever the other drivers were saying. I frowned and checked the CB unit. All the lights were on. Everything looked normal. I switched channels, but every channel had the same static. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of an empty radio channel, but complete silence. Like the radio had just shut off entirely. I checked the unit again. It was still on, still showing that it was transmitting, but there was no sound coming through at all. No voices, no static, nothing. I tried keying the mic. Breaker 19, this is Briggs hauling south on 83. Anybody out there? Nothing. Breaker 19, radio check. Anybody copy? Still nothing. I switched through all 40 channels, calling out on each one, but there was no response. It was like every other truck on the road had just vanished. I told myself it was probably just a dead zone, some quirk of the terrain that was blocking the signal. I'd hit patches like that before, places where the CB just didn't work for whatever reason. Usually, you'd drive for a few miles and the signal would come back. I kept driving. About 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Linda. I reached for it, glad to hear from her, but when I answered, all I got was silence. Hello? Linda? Nothing. The call was connected. I could see the timer counting up on the screen, but there was no sound. No voice, no static, just dead air. Linda, can you hear me? The line went dead. Call ended. I looked at the phone and saw something that made my stomach drop. No signal. 0 bars. I'd had full signal just a few minutes ago. Now, suddenly, nothing. I glanced up at the road, then back at the phone. The no service indicator was blinking at the top of the screen. This didn't make sense. I'd driven this route dozens of times and always had decent cell coverage. Sure, there were spots where the signal would drop to 1 or 2 bars, but complete loss of service? That was unusual. I tried calling Linda back. The phone just gave me an error message. Call failed. All right, I thought, stay calm. Cell towers go down, it happens. I'd just have to wait until I got a bit further down the road and try again. I set the phone back in its holder and focused on driving. The road ahead was perfectly straight, the yellow center line stretching into the darkness like an arrow. My headlights illuminated maybe 200 feet ahead of me, showing nothing but empty asphalt and the white fog line on my right. To my left was the opposite lane, equally empty. Beyond the edges of the road, there was just darkness. No lights from farmhouses, no distant glow of a town, nothing. The isolation was starting to get to me, which was strange because I'd driven alone for years. I was used to being by myself on empty highways, but this felt different. This felt wrong somehow. I checked my mirrors, more out of habit than anything else. Behind me was nothing but darkness and the faint red glow of my own taillights reflected in the mirror. No other vehicles in sight. I looked down at my dashboard. Everything looked normal. Fuel gauge showing 3/4 of a tank. Oil pressure good. Temperature normal. Speedometer steady at 65. The only thing that wasn't working was the CB radio, which was still showing power but not producing any sound, and my cell phone, which still had no signal. 10 more minutes passed. The road stayed straight and empty. No other vehicles, no signs, no lights. Just the road and the darkness. I started to feel uneasy. Not scared exactly, but definitely uncomfortable. There was something about the quality of the silence that bothered me. With the CB dead and no other vehicles around, the only sound was my engine and the road noise from my tires. Normally, that would be fine, but combined with everything else, it was starting to feel oppressive. I tried the CB again. Still nothing. I tried my phone. Still no signal. "Come on," I muttered. "This is ridiculous." I'd been driving on Route 83 for maybe 45 minutes at this point, and according to my GPS, which was still working, thankfully, I should be getting close to the small town of Thedford. Not much there, maybe a gas station and a couple of houses, but at least it would be some sign of civilization. Some proof that the rest of the world still existed. But as I kept driving, there was no sign of Thedford. No lights in the distance, no buildings, nothing. I checked the GPS again. It showed me right on Route 83, right where I should be, but it didn't show Thedford at all. The map just showed the highway as a line cutting through empty space. That's when I started to feel actual fear. I'd driven through Thedford before, I knew it was there. But according to my GPS, it didn't exist. The map showed Route 83, showed my position on the road, but everything else was just blank. I slowed down, not sure what else to do. My speedometer dropped to 50, then 40. I was scanning the darkness on both sides of the road, looking for any sign of lights or buildings. There was nothing. Then my phone lit up. I grabbed it immediately, hoping it was Linda calling back, hoping the signal had returned. But what I saw on the screen made me hit the brakes. It was a call. The screen showed incoming call, but where the number or name should have been, there was just a string of zeros. Not unknown caller or blocked number like you sometimes see. Just 0000000. My truck was barely rolling now, maybe 5 miles an hour or so an hour. I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Every instinct I had was telling me not to answer it, but at the same time, I was desperate for any kind of human contact, any proof that my phone still worked. I answered it. "Hello?" For a moment, there was nothing, just silence, like the failed call with Linda. But then I heard something that made every hair on my body stand up. It was my own voice, not exactly my voice. It was distorted somehow, like it was coming through water or being played on a damaged recording. But it was definitely me. I could hear myself speaking, but I couldn't make out the words. It was like listening to myself talk in another room, the words muffled and indistinct. "Hello?" I said again, my voice cracking slightly. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end kept talking, kept saying things I couldn't quite hear. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, straining to make out the words. For just a second, just one brief moment, the audio cleared up, and I heard myself say, "Don't stop driving." Then the call ended. Just like that, cut off mid-sentence. I looked at the phone. The call timer had shown only 15 seconds. The screen went back to showing no service. My hands were shaking. I realized I'd brought my truck to a complete stop in the middle of the road. I was just sitting there, engine idling, staring at my phone like it was going to explain what the hell had just happened. That's when I noticed my GPS. The screen had changed. Instead of showing my position on Route 83, it was now showing just a blank screen with a single pulsing dot in the center. No roads, no landmarks, no compass, just that one dot, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. I pressed the screen, trying to get it to refresh. Nothing happened. I tried hitting the power button, tried restarting it. The screen stayed the same, just that pulsing dot. "Okay," I said out loud, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, this is fine, just a technical glitch. Multiple technical glitches happening at the same time. That's possible." Even as I said it, I didn't believe it. This wasn't coincidence. Something was wrong with this road, with this place. Every piece of technology I had was either failing or acting in ways that made no sense. I took a deep breath and looked up at the road ahead. My headlights showed the same thing they'd been showing for the past hour. Empty highway stretching into darkness. But now it felt different. Now it felt like I was looking into something that went on forever, like the road itself was infinite and I was the only thing moving through it. I put my hand on the gear shift. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, to get off this highway and find another route. But the thought of turning back filled me with a dread I couldn't explain. It wasn't logical, but the idea of going backwards, of driving back the way I came, felt even more wrong than continuing forward. Plus, I told myself, I had a delivery to make. I was a professional. I'd driven through worse conditions than this. So the electronics were acting up, so what? I didn't need a CB radio or a cell phone to drive. I didn't even really need the GPS. I knew Route 83 ran straight south, and eventually it would hit other roads, other towns. All I had to do was keep driving. I shifted back into gear and started moving again, bringing my speed back up to 65. The hum of the engine and the road noise returned, filling the silence. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, focusing on the yellow line, focusing on staying steady. The minutes ticked by. 5 minutes. 10. 15. The road stayed straight and empty. I glanced at my odometer. I'd gone about 12 miles since the CB radio first cut out. By now, I should have definitely passed through Thedford. I should be seeing signs for other towns. But there was nothing. Just the road and the darkness. I tried the CB again. Dead silence. I tried my phone. No signal. I checked the GPS. Still just that pulsing dot. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I kept driving. Kept telling myself that this was all normal. That everything would be fine once I got a little further down the road. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I was starting to realize that something was very, very wrong. The road should have curved by now. Route 83 isn't perfectly straight. There are gentle curves, slight variations in direction. But the road I was on showed no variation at all. It was like driving on a ruler's edge, perfectly straight, perfectly flat, going on forever. I was about to try my phone again when I saw something in the distance. A light, just a single point of light on the right side of the road, maybe a mile ahead. Relief flooded through me. Finally, something. A building, maybe, or a rest stop, or at least a street light. Proof that I hadn't somehow driven off the edge of the world. I kept my eyes on that light as I drove toward it. It didn't seem to be getting any closer, which I attributed to the darkness playing tricks on my depth perception. But as I drove, as the minutes passed, the light stayed the same size, the same distance away. After what felt like 10 minutes of driving directly toward it, the light didn't look any closer at all. That's when I realized I might not be moving forward anymore. I pressed harder on the accelerator. My speedometer showed 70 miles per hour now, faster than I should be going, but I needed to know if I was actually moving. The engine roared louder, the cabin vibrating with the increased speed, but that light in the distance stayed exactly the same size. This wasn't possible. Even if the light was further away than I thought, even if it was 5 miles down the road instead of 1, I should be seeing some change in its appearance. Some growth in its size, some variation in its position. But it remained static, like a photograph. like something painted on the inside of a dome that surrounded me. I eased off the accelerator, bringing my speed back down to 65. My fuel gauge had dropped slightly, proving that my engine was running, that I was burning diesel. But was I actually covering distance? I looked at my odometer. When I'd first turned on to Route 83, it had read 287,432 miles. I'd been driving for over an hour now. I should have covered at least 70 miles, probably more. But the odometer now read 287,438, 6 miles. In over an hour of driving, my odometer claimed I'd only gone 6 miles. I stared at the numbers, waiting for them to change, waiting for them to suddenly jump forward and show the correct reading. They didn't move. Well, they did move. The 1/10 of a mile digit was slowly ticking upward as I drove, but far too slowly. Way too slowly for the speed I was traveling. "This isn't real," I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the cabin, flat and dead, like the air itself was absorbing the sound. "This can't be real." But it was real. I could feel the steering wheel in my hands, feel the vibration of the road through my seat, smell the faint scent of diesel and the pine air freshener hanging from my mirror. Everything felt completely normal except for the fact that nothing was working the way it should. I checked my clock. It showed 11:47 p.m. That seemed about right. I'd been on Route 83 for roughly an hour. But then I remembered looking at my phone when I'd answered that strange call. What time had that been? I couldn't remember. The fear and confusion had driven the detail from my mind. But I thought it had been earlier than this. I thought it had been around 11:15 or 11:20. If that was true, then I'd lost time somewhere, or gained it. Or, and this thought made my stomach clench, time itself was behaving differently here. I forced myself to focus on the road. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to think logically, needed to figure out what was happening. Maybe there was a rational explanation for all of this. Maybe I was having some kind of medical episode, a stroke, or a seizure that was causing hallucinations. Or maybe I'd fallen asleep without realizing it, and this was all a dream. I reached down and pinched my arm hard enough to leave a mark. Pain shot through my forearm, sharp and immediate. I was awake. The light ahead continued to hover in the distance, unchanged. I tried to think about what could cause this kind of phenomenon. I'm not a scientist, but I read a lot during my downtime, and I'd come across articles about electromagnetic anomalies, about places where compasses spin uselessly and electronics fail. There were stories about the Bermuda Triangle, about mysterious disappearances, about entire ships and planes vanishing without explanation. But those were just stories, weren't they? I gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving. What else could I do? Stopping seemed even worse than continuing. At least while I was moving, I was doing something, taking action, however futile it might be. Another 10 minutes passed according to my clock, though it felt like much longer. The light ahead remained constant. My odometer had climbed to 287,441 now. 3 more miles added in 10 minutes, which was absurdly slow. Then something changed. I saw another light appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was another vehicle, someone else on the road behind me. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Another person meant I wasn't alone in this, meant there was someone else experiencing the same thing, someone who could confirm that this was real. But as I watched the light in my mirror, I realized it wasn't moving either. It was just sitting there, maybe a mile behind me, stationary like the light ahead. I had 2 lights now, one ahead, one behind, both the same distance away, both perfectly still. My breathing was getting faster, more shallow. I could feel panic starting to set in. Could feel it creeping up from my chest into my throat. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deeply. Panicking would only make things worse. I decided to try something. I slowed down gradually, bringing my speed down to 40, then 30, then 20. If these lights were real objects in the distance, they should appear to get closer as I slowed down. Or rather, as my rate of approach changed, the visual relationship should change too. The lights didn't move. Both remained at exactly the same apparent distance. I stopped completely. My truck sat idling in the middle of the empty highway. The light ahead stayed where it was. The light behind stayed where it was. Neither moved, neither changed, neither showed any response to my stopping. The silence inside the cabin felt oppressive now. Without the road noise, there was just the low rumble of my engine and the sound of my own breathing. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, fast and hard. I looked at my phone again, some desperate part of me hoping that the signal had returned, that I could call someone, get help, talk to another human being. The screen still showed no service. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. I realized I was terrified, truly terrified in a way I'd never been before. This wasn't like being scared of a dangerous driver or worried about bad weather. This was a deep, primal fear of something fundamentally wrong with reality itself. The CB radio suddenly crackled. I jumped so hard I hit my head on the roof of the cabin. My hand flew to the radio, desperate to hear something, anything, any proof that the outside world still existed. Static poured from the speaker, but it wasn't the normal white noise I'd heard before. This was different. This had a pattern to it, a rhythm, almost like speech, but not quite. Like words that had been degraded into pure noise. Hello? I grabbed the mic, keying it. This is Cole Briggs on Route 83. Can anyone hear me? Over. The static continued, unchanging. But now I could almost hear something in it, something that might have been a voice. I turned up the volume, pressing my ear close to the speaker. There was definitely something there, not words exactly, but something that wanted to be words, something that was trying to resolve itself into meaning but couldn't quite make it. The static would rise and fall, forming patterns that were almost intelligible, and then dissolve back into noise. I kept listening, straining to hear, and for just a moment, just one brief, terrible moment, I thought I heard my own name. Cole. It came through the static like a whisper, like something calling from very far away. And it was my voice again. That same distorted version of my own voice I'd heard on the phone call. Cole, still here? Still driving? Who is this? I shouted into the mic. What do you want? The static swelled, became louder, more intense, and then, cutting through it like a knife, I heard, "Behind you." I dropped the mic and spun it around, looking through the rear window of my cabin into the cargo area behind me. Nothing. Just my bunk and my storage compartments and the curtain that separated the cabin from the trailer. When I turned back around, the light that had been ahead of me was gone. I blinked, sure I was seeing things wrong. But no. The road ahead was completely dark now. The light that had been hovering in the distance for the past hour was simply gone, like it had never been there. I checked my rearview mirror. The light behind me was still there. The static from the CB radio suddenly cut off, leaving silence. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. The screen showed a text message, but the sender was listed as unknown. The message itself was just one line. Keep driving, don't look back. My hands were trembling as I read it. The phone showed no signal, no bars at all, but somehow this message had come through. As I watched, the message disappeared from the screen, like it had deleted itself. I tried to open my Messages app to see if it was still there, but the app wouldn't open. When I tried to navigate to it, my phone just showed a blank screen. A sound came from behind me. It was soft, almost inaudible over the engine, but I heard it. A rustling sound, like fabric moving, like something shifting in the back of my cabin. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I stared straight ahead, not wanting to look back, not wanting to see what might be behind me. The text message had said, "Don't look back," but the sound came again, louder this time, unmistakable. Something was in my truck. Slowly, moving just my eyes, I glanced at my rearview mirror. The mirror showed the interior of my cabin, my bunk, my storage area, the curtain. Everything looked normal, nothing was moving. But I knew I'd heard something. The rational part of my brain tried to provide explanations. Maybe something had shifted when I hit the brakes. Maybe there was something loose in the storage compartments. Maybe it was just the truck settling. But I didn't believe any of those explanations. Not really. Not after everything else that had happened. I put my hand on the gear shift, ready to start driving again, when my headlights flickered. It was just for a second, a brief dimming and brightening, but it was enough to make me realize that my headlights had been showing the same stretch of road for the past several minutes. Despite the fact that I'd been stopped, despite the fact that I'd seen the light ahead disappear, the road in front of me looked exactly the same as it had before. Same yellow line, same white fog line, same empty asphalt stretching into darkness. I hadn't moved, but somehow the road looked identical to how it had looked when I was driving 70 miles per hour. Like I was on a treadmill, running in place, the scenery unchanging no matter what I did. This thought triggered something in my memory. That voice on the CB radio, my own voice, had said, "Still driving." Not driving, but still driving. Like I'd been driving for a long time. Like I'd been driving forever. What if I had been? What if I'd been on this road for much longer than I thought? What if time was passing differently here, and what felt like an hour was actually days or weeks? What if I'd been driving in circles, or driving nowhere, trapped in some kind of loop? The thought was so terrifying that I almost couldn't process it. But it would explain so much. The unchanging road, the lights that never got closer, the way my odometer barely moved despite hours of driving. I needed to get off this road now. I shifted into gear and pressed the accelerator, bringing my speed up quickly. The truck lurched forward, the engine roaring. I pushed it faster than before, hitting 75, then 80. The speedometer needle crept toward 85. The road stayed perfectly straight. No curves, no variations, just that yellow line pointing into infinity. In my rearview mirror, the light behind me started to grow. At first, I thought it was because I was driving away from it, that the increased distance was causing some kind of visual effect. But then I realized the light wasn't getting smaller. It was getting bigger. Getting closer, it was following me. I pushed the accelerator all the way down. My truck wasn't built for this kind of speed, and I could hear the engine straining, could feel the whole vehicle shaking with the effort. The speedometer hit 90, then 95. The light in my mirror kept growing. It was closer now, close enough that I could see it wasn't just a single light, but multiple lights arranged in a pattern. Like headlights. Like another truck behind me, bearing down fast. But there was something wrong with those lights. They didn't look quite right. The pattern was off somehow, the spacing between them too wide or too narrow, the color not quite matching any headlights I'd ever seen. The CB radio crackled back to life. "Cole." My own voice, clearer now, more distinct. "Cole, you need to stop." "No," I said out loud, not keying the mic, just talking to the empty cabin. "No, I'm not stopping. You have to stop, Cole. You can't run from this." The lights in my mirror were very close now, maybe only 100 feet behind me. At the speed I was going, that meant whatever was behind me was traveling at well over 100 miles per hour. "Cole, please, stop the truck." The voice sounded sad now, resigned, like it was trying to tell me something important but knew I wouldn't listen. My truck was shaking violently at this speed. I'd never pushed it this hard before, never gone this fast. Something under the hood was making a high-pitched whining sound that definitely wasn't normal. I knew I couldn't maintain this for long, knew that something was going to break, or overheat, or fail. But I couldn't stop. Whatever was behind me, whatever those lights belonged to, I couldn't let it catch up. The road ahead suddenly curved. It was the first change in the road I'd seen in over an hour, and I almost missed it. My headlights swept across the curve just in time for me to see it. A gentle bend to the left, maybe 20 degrees. At the speed I was going, it shouldn't have been a problem, but I'd been driving straight for so long that my hands didn't react properly. I turned the wheel too hard, overcorrecting, and felt the truck start to slide. Time seemed to slow down. I could feel the tires losing traction, could feel the back end of the trailer starting to swing out. I'd driven for 17 years without a single serious accident, and now I was about to jackknife at 95 miles per hour in the middle of nowhere. I turned into the slide, trying to regain control, my hands moving on pure instinct and muscle memory. The truck fishtailed, the trailer swinging left then right, the whole vehicle threatening to tip. For a moment, I thought I was going to die. Then, somehow, the tires caught. The truck straightened out. I was through the curve and back on straight road, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. I eased off the accelerator, bringing my speed down to something more manageable. 80, 70, 60. My hands were locked on the wheel so tight that my knuckles had gone white. I checked my mirror. The lights were gone. Whatever had been following me was just gone. The road behind me was empty, just darkness and the faint glow of my own taillights. The CB radio was silent. My phone showed no signal, but it wasn't buzzing with mysterious messages anymore. The GPS screen still showed just that pulsing dot, but as I watched, roads began to appear around it. Lines forming out of nothing, connecting, creating a map. Within seconds, it looked normal again, showing Route 83 running south with my position marked on it. I was shaking all over, adrenaline and fear coursing through my system. But I was still driving, still moving forward, and the road was behaving normally now. It had curves again, gentle variations in direction. In the distance, I could see what looked like the faint glow of lights, actual town lights, not mysterious hovering points. I drove for another 5 minutes, my breathing slowly returning to normal, my hands gradually relaxing their death grip on the wheel. Signs started appearing along the roadside. Speed limit signs, mile markers, a green highway sign announcing that Valentine, Nebraska was 47 miles ahead. Valentine, a real town on my map with a real distance. Everything seemed to be going back to normal. My odometer was behaving properly again, too. As I drove, I watched it tick upward at the correct rate, matching my speed. The CB radio crackled once more, and this time I heard actual voices. 2 truckers discussing road conditions, talking about construction near Chadron. Normal conversation. Normal voices that weren't my own. I grabbed the mic with trembling hands. "Breaker 19, this is Briggs. Anyone copy?" "Copy, Briggs," a gravelly voice responded immediately. "This is Tanner, heading north on 83. What's your 20? "South of Valentine," I said, my voice cracking slightly. You seeing anything weird out there tonight?" A pause. "Weird how?" "Never mind," I said quickly. "Just, never mind. Rough night. Thanks for the response. 10-4. Keep the shiny side up, driver." I set the mic down and exhaled slowly. I was back. Whatever had happened, whatever that was, I was back in the real world now. My phone buzzed. I looked at it cautiously, half expecting another mysterious message. But it was just Linda calling. I answered it, and this time I heard her voice clearly. "Cole, are you okay? I tried calling you like 20 times. "I'm fine," I said, and even I could hear how shaky my voice was. "Cell service was out for a while. I'm fine." "You don't sound fine. What's wrong?" "Just a rough stretch of road. I'll tell you about it when I get home." We talked for a few more minutes, normal conversation about normal things, and by the time we hung up, I almost felt like myself again. Almost. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened back there. Something that I didn't understand, and probably never would. I'd lost time, or gained it, or existed outside of it entirely. I'd been somewhere that wasn't quite real, driving on a road that wasn't quite a road. And that voice, my own voice, telling me to stop, telling me I couldn't run. Run from what? I pushed the thought away and focused on driving. Valentine appeared in the distance, its lights growing steadily larger as I approached. Real lights, attached to real buildings, in a real town. I'd never been so happy to see civilization, but even as I drove through Valentine and continued south toward North Platte, even as the night progressed normally and I completed my delivery on schedule, a part of me couldn't stop thinking about that stretch of road. I've driven Route 83 dozens of times since that night, always during the day, always making sure I pass through that section with plenty of sunlight and traffic around me. During the day, it looks completely normal. Just another rural highway cutting through farm country, but I've never driven it at night again. And I never will. I made my delivery to North Platte just after 3 in the morning. The warehouse supervisor who met me at the loading dock was half asleep, barely grunting a greeting as he directed me to back up to Bay 7. I went through the motions automatically, checking the seals, opening the trailer, watching the forklift operators unload the agricultural equipment I'd been hauling. The whole time, my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying what had happened on Route 83, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some rational explanation that would let me file it away as a strange experience and move on. But I couldn't. Every explanation I came up with fell apart under scrutiny. Equipment malfunction? All my equipment at once, including my odometer and clock? Atmospheric anomaly? That would explain the signal loss maybe, but not the voices, not the lights, not the road itself stretching into impossibility. Some kind of hallucination? But everything had felt real, more than real, hyper-real, like reality turned up too loud. Sir, you need to sign here." I blinked and realized the supervisor was standing in front of me with a clipboard. I signed the delivery confirmation with a hand that still wasn't quite steady, took my copy, and climbed back into my truck. The logical thing to do would have been to find a truck stop, grab a few hours of sleep, and then head home. But I wasn't tired. The fear and adrenaline from earlier had faded, replaced by a kind of manic alertness that I knew from experience wouldn't let me sleep even if I tried. So I started driving. Not home. That would have meant getting back on Route 83, even if just for a few miles, and I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I took Highway 80 east, adding hours to my trip, but keeping me on major interstates with plenty of traffic and cell coverage. The sun came up as I was passing through Grand Island. I pulled into a Flying J, filled up my tank, and went inside for coffee. The fluorescent lights and the smell of bad coffee and breakfast sandwiches were the most comforting things I'd experienced in hours. Normal. Mundane. Real. I sat in a booth by the window watching other truckers come and go and pulled out my phone. Full signal. 5 bars. I stared at it for a long moment, then opened my call history. The call from Linda that had failed at 11:02 p.m. was there. The successful call from Linda at 12:43 a.m. was there. But between them, there should have been another call. That strange call with the string of zeros. The call where I'd heard my own voice. It wasn't in my call history at all. Like it had never happened. I checked my messages. The text that had told me to keep driving. To not look back. Also gone. Not in my message history. Not in my deleted messages. Nowhere. I opened the browser on my phone and searched for Route 83 Nebraska anomalies. Nothing useful came up. I tried Route 83 signal loss, Route 83 missing time, Route 83 strange occurrences. Most of the results were just generic information about the highway, some travel blogs, nothing relating to what I'd experienced. But then I found something. It was a post on a trucking forum from 3 years ago, buried deep in a thread about unusual road conditions. The user, someone called Wheels Down 72, had written, "Anyone ever have problems on 83 between Thedford and Valentine? Drove through there last night and my CB and cell both went dead for almost an hour. Freaked me out. Couldn't get through to dispatch." There were only 2 replies. One said, "Happens sometimes in rural areas. Dead zones." The other said, 83 is weird at night. Stick to daytime if you can." That was it. No elaboration, no shared experiences, nothing more. But it was something. Proof that I wasn't the only one who'd experienced something strange on that stretch of road. I kept searching, trying different search terms, looking through more trucking forums. I found a few other scattered mentions of signal problems on Route 83, but nothing that described what I'd gone through. No one talking about impossible roads, or mysterious lights, or hearing their own voice through the static. My coffee had gone cold. I checked the time. It was already past 8 in the morning. Linda would be up, probably wondering why I hadn't called to say I was almost home. I dialed her number, and she answered on the first ring. "Cole, where are you?" "Flying J in Grand Island. Look, I know I said I'd be home by 3, but I took a different route. I'll probably be another 4 or 5 hours. Is everything okay? You sounded really shaken last night." I wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to describe what had happened. Wanted to hear her tell me it was real, that I wasn't losing my mind. But how could I explain it? How could I put into words the feeling of being caught in a place where distance and time didn't work properly? "I'm fine," I said finally. "Just had a rough night. Lost signal for a while, couldn't get through to you. Made me a little paranoid. Cole, really, I'm fine. I'll tell you about it when I get home." We talked for a few more minutes, but I could hear the concern in her voice. She knew something was wrong, knew I wasn't telling her everything. But she didn't push, and eventually we hung up with me promising to drive carefully and call her when I was an hour out. I sat there in the booth for another 20 minutes, drinking cold coffee and trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to get back in my truck and drive straight home. Forget about Route 83. Forget about the whole experience. File it away as one of those things that happen sometimes, inexplicable but ultimately not worth dwelling on. But another part of me, a stubborn part that had gotten me through 17 years of long-haul trucking, wanted answers. Needed answers. Because what if it happened again? What if I ended up on another road like that? Or what if that stretch of Route 83 wasn't unique? What if there were other places like it, waiting to trap unsuspecting drivers in their impossible geography? I pulled up the map on my phone and looked at Route 83. During the day, in this brightly lit truck stop with dozens of people around me, it just looked like a normal highway, a thin line on a screen marking a road that connected real places where real people lived and worked and drove without incident every single day. But I knew better now. I knew that there was something wrong with that road, at least at night, at least under certain conditions I didn't understand. I zoomed in on the section between Thedford and Valentine, the stretch where everything had gone wrong. The map showed it as a straight shot, maybe 40 miles of highway cutting through ranch land and sandhills. Nothing unusual, nothing that would suggest it was anything other than a quiet, rural road. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Just south of where Thedford should be, there was a tiny gray dot on the map. When I tapped on it, the label read, Thedford Ranger Station, closed. I zoomed in further. There were a few other markers along Route 83 in that area, a rest area, a historical marker, a couple of unnamed county roads branching off. But something about the way they were positioned seemed off. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but the spacing between the markers didn't look quite right. It was like the map was stretching to accommodate a distance that didn't quite fit properly. I tried to measure the distance from Thedford to Valentine using the map's built-in tool. It came up as 43 miles. Then I tried using a different map app. That one said 47 miles. A third app said 41 miles. 3 different maps, 3 different distances, for what should have been a fixed, measurable stretch of highway. I sat back in the booth, staring at my phone. This didn't prove anything. Map apps were sometimes inaccurate, especially for rural roads. The distances could vary depending on which specific points were being measured, or the apps could be using different data sources. But it bothered me. Added to everything else I'd experienced, it bothered me a lot. I finished my coffee and headed back out to my truck. The morning was clear and bright, the kind of late fall day where the air is crisp and cold but the sun is strong enough to make you squint. The parking lot was busy with activity, trucks coming and going, drivers fueling up or grabbing food, or just taking a break from the road. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. So why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible? I climbed into my truck and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I was going back to Route 83. During the day, I told myself. During broad daylight with plenty of traffic around, with all my equipment working properly. I'd drive that stretch again, pay attention to the mile markers and landmarks, see if I could figure out what had happened last night. It was stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. Linda would be furious if she knew. My dispatcher would have questions about why I was burning fuel on unnecessary mileage. And there was always the chance that whatever had happened last night would happen again, that I'd find myself trapped on that impossible road with no way out. But I had to know. I had to understand. I took Highway 30 west out of Grand Island, then cut north on a county road that would take me to Route 83 south of Thedford. The drive took about 2 hours, and with every mile, I felt my determination wavering. This was crazy. What did I think I was going to find? A sign saying, "Warning, reality doesn't work properly past this point"? But I kept driving. I reached Route 83 just before noon. The highway looked completely innocuous in the daylight. 2 lanes of gray asphalt running north-south through rolling sandhills covered in brown grass. A few cattle grazed in a pasture to my right. In the distance, I could see a farmhouse, white with a red barn, smoke rising from a chimney. Normal. Totally, completely normal. I turned south onto Route 83, the same direction I'd been traveling last night. My odometer read 287,500. 6 miles now. I'd put over 100 miles on the truck since last night, not even counting the delivery distance. I kept my speed at exactly 60 miles per hour and watched the mile markers as I passed them. Mile marker 178. Mile marker 177. Mile marker 176. They were spaced properly, appearing at regular intervals, marking distance in a way that made sense. My phone had full signal. My CB radio was working perfectly, picking up chatter from other drivers. My GPS showed my position accurately on the map, my little blue dot moving smoothly down the highway in real time. Everything was working exactly as it should. I passed through what my GPS labeled as Thedford, barely even a town, just a handful of buildings clustered around the intersection where Route 83 crossed Highway 2. There was a gas station, closed, a post office, a few houses. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested this was the gateway to some kind of geographic anomaly. I kept driving south. The landscape rolled by at a steady pace. Sandhills, ranch land, the occasional windmill. Every few minutes, I'd pass another vehicle going the opposite direction. A pickup truck, a sedan, another semi. Normal traffic patterns for a rural highway at midday. I checked my odometer regularly. After 30 minutes of driving at 60 miles per hour, it showed I'd covered exactly 30 miles. The math worked. Distance and time and speed all lined up perfectly, the way they were supposed to. Mile marker 147, mile marker 146, mile marker 145. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. Just a road. I was starting to feel foolish. What had I expected to find? Whatever had happened last night was clearly specific to nighttime conditions, or maybe specific to that one particular moment. Coming back during the day had been a waste of time and fuel. But then I noticed something. Between mile markers 143 and 142, there was a gap that seemed slightly too long. Not by much, maybe only by a few seconds. But my internal sense of timing, honed by 17 years of driving, told me something was off. I checked my speedometer. Still 60 miles per hour. I watched the odometer, still ticking upward at the correct rate. But that gap between markers had been longer than it should have been. I slowed down, bringing my speed to 50, then 40. I was looking for something now, scanning the sides of the road, the landscape, trying to see what I'd seen last night. Where had that first light been? Where had things started to go wrong? Mile marker 141. Mile marker 140. There. Just past mile marker 140, on the right side of the road, I saw something that made me hit the brakes. It was a rest area, or what had once been a rest area. There was a faded brown sign with white lettering that read, "Rest Area 1 mile." But the sign itself looked old, weathered, like it had been standing there for decades. I couldn't remember passing this sign last night, but then again, I'd been focused on other things. I drove slowly forward. The rest area appeared on my right, a paved turnoff leading to a small parking area with a few picnic tables and an old bathroom facility. But what caught my attention was that the pavement of the turnoff was broken and cracked, with weeds growing through it. The picnic tables were rusted and falling apart. One of them had collapsed entirely, its bench rotted through. The bathroom building looked like it hadn't been used in years. The door hung open on broken hinges and I could see graffiti on the walls inside. But according to the sign I'd just passed, this rest area was maintained by the Nebraska Department of Transportation. It should have been in usable condition. Instead, it looked abandoned, forgotten. I pulled into the rest area and stopped my truck. For a long moment, I just sat there, engine idling, staring at the decrepit buildings. Something was wrong with this place. Even in broad daylight, even with the sun shining and birds chirping in the distance, there was something off about it. An absence of presence, like the area existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of the rest area, thinking I might report it to the DOT or at least have some evidence of what I'd found. But when I looked at the photo I'd just taken, the rest area looked different. The pavement was intact. The picnic tables looked new. The bathroom building appeared clean and maintained. I lowered the phone and looked at the real rest area in front of me. Abandoned and decaying. I raised the phone again and looked at the screen. Clean and maintained. My hands started shaking. I took 3 more pictures, each from a slightly different angle. Every single one showed a well-maintained rest area that bore no resemblance to what I was actually seeing. I set the phone down carefully on the passenger seat and took a deep breath. This was like last night, but different. Last night, the world had changed around me. Now, the world was showing me 2 different versions of itself simultaneously. One version that I could see with my eyes, another version that appeared through my camera. Which one was real? I looked at my GPS. It showed my position clearly, sitting in a rest area on Route 83 between mile markers 140 and 141. I zoomed in on the map trying to see if the rest area was marked. It wasn't. According to my GPS, I was sitting in an empty spot by the side of the road, but I could clearly see the rest area around me. The CB radio crackled, making me jump. A voice came through, clearer than any CB transmission I'd ever heard. "Cole Briggs, you're getting close now." It wasn't my voice this time. It was a woman's voice, calm and matter-of-fact, like she was commenting on the weather. I grabbed the mic with trembling hands. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" "You felt it last night, the space between places. You drove through it without understanding." "I don't understand what you're talking about." "What space? What?" "The road remembers, Cole. It remembers everyone who passes through. And some of us it keeps." The transmission ended. I tried to respond, but the CB had gone back to its normal channels. Different drivers talking about different things, none of them addressing me or even seeming to know I'd just been part of a conversation. I set the mic down and looked at the rest area again. It still appeared abandoned to my eyes. I pulled out my phone and took another picture. Still maintained and clean, I needed to leave. Whatever this place was, I needed to get back on the highway and get out of here. But as I reached for the gear shift, something in my peripheral vision caught my attention. There was someone standing by the bathroom building. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I might see. It was a figure, human-shaped, but somehow wrong. Not transparent or ghostly, but not quite solid either. Like a photograph that had been layered imperfectly over reality. The figure was wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothes, coveralls, and a work shirt, the kind a farmer or rancher might have worn in the 1950s or 60s. I couldn't make out any facial features, just a general impression of a face, like looking at someone through frosted glass. The figure raised one arm, pointing south down Route 83. Then it was gone. Not fading away, not walking away, just suddenly not there anymore. I sat frozen in my seat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there, to put this rest area in my rearview mirror and never look back. But that woman's voice on the CB had said I was getting close. Close to what? Close to understanding what had happened last night? Close to figuring out what was wrong with this stretch of road? Or close to becoming like that figure I'd just seen? Something caught between real and not real, trapped in a place that existed outside normal space and time? I shifted into gear and pulled back onto Route 83, heading south. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel again, but I kept driving. The rest area disappeared behind me. Mile marker 139, mile marker 138. Everything looked normal. Fields and hills and fence posts. A hawk circling overhead. A tractor working in a distant field. But I could feel it now. That same wrongness I'd felt last night, but subtler during the day. Like the world was stretched thin here, like reality was having trouble maintaining its normal structure. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and nearly drove off the road. It was a text message. From me. My own phone number was listed as the sender. The message read, "You shouldn't have come back." I stared at the screen, then at the road, then back at the screen. The message was still there, still showing my own number as the sender. As I watched, another message appeared. "Turn around, Cole, while you still can." A third message. "The road goes on forever here. Some roads do. We're still driving, all of us, still trying to find the end." I grabbed the phone and threw it onto the passenger seat, not wanting to see any more messages. But I could hear it buzzing, over and over, message after message arriving. The landscape outside was starting to look familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. That cluster of trees on the left. Had I passed it already? That particular arrangement of fence posts. Had I seen it before? I checked my odometer. It was still advancing normally, still showing that I was covering distance. But the landscape felt repetitive, like I was driving through a loop, seeing the same things over and over with slight variations. Mile marker 137, mile marker 136, mile marker 135. The numbers were going down. I was definitely moving south. But something about the space between the markers felt wrong again, felt stretched, felt like I was covering more distance than the numbers indicated. My CB crackled back to life. This time, it was my own voice. "Cole, you need to get off this road." "I'm trying," I said out loud, not bothering with the mic. "I'm trying." "Not south. South doesn't work. You have to go back. You have to go back before you pass the threshold." What threshold? But the voice was gone, replaced by static. I looked at my GPS. The map was starting to distort again, the roads bending and warping in ways that didn't make sense. My position marker was flickering, jumping between different points on Route 83. Up ahead, I saw a sign. As I got closer, I could read it. Valentine, 25 miles. But that didn't make sense. I'd been driving south for at least 45 minutes. Even accounting for the rest area stop, I should be much closer to Valentine than that. I should be practically on top of it by now. I checked my odometer. According to the miles I'd put on since getting back on Route 83 after the rest area, I should have covered almost 30 miles. But the sign said I still had 25 miles to go. I'd lost distance. Somehow, I'd lost distance while driving forward. That's when I saw the light. The same light from last night, hovering in the distance ahead of me. Single point of illumination in broad daylight. Visible despite the sun. Fixed in space like a star that had fallen to Earth and gotten stuck. And behind me, when I checked my rearview mirror, another light had appeared. I was back in it. Whatever it was, whatever that stretch of impossible road was, I was back in it. During the day this time, with the sun shining, but it didn't matter. The rules were breaking down again. My phone was still buzzing on the passenger seat, message after message arriving. I could hear the CB radio cycling through channels on its own, bursts of static and fragments of voices. My GPS screen was flickering rapidly now, showing different maps, different locations, like it couldn't decide where I actually was. The distance to Valentine on the signs changed as I drove. First, 25 miles. Then, somehow, 30 miles. Then, 42 miles. I was driving forward, but the destination was getting farther away. I was caught in it again. And this time, I had come here voluntarily. This time, there was no excuse of darkness or confusion or not knowing what I was driving into. This time, I'd walked right into the trap with my eyes open. The worst part was that I could still see the normal world around the edges. When I looked directly at something, the road ahead, the landscape, the signs, everything appeared normal. But in my peripheral vision, I could see things that weren't quite right, shapes that didn't match what they should be. colors that were slightly off, movements where there shouldn't be any movement. It was like reality was a mask that was starting to slip, and I could see glimpses of what lay underneath. I tried turning around, found a gravel access road and swung my truck around in a wide circle, pointing north now instead of south. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel, but I managed it. I was heading back the way I'd come, heading toward Thetford and safety. The road stretched ahead of me, perfectly straight. I drove for 15 minutes at 60 miles per hour. 15 minutes, which meant I should have covered 15 miles. But the mile markers told a different story. Mile marker 135. Mile marker 134. Mile marker 134 again. Mile marker 133. I was barely moving, despite the feeling of speed, despite the sound of my engine, despite everything that told me I was driving forward at normal velocity. The sun was still up, but it seemed dimmer now, like something was filtering the light, making everything appear as if it was underwater or behind smoked glass. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. I picked it up carefully, afraid of what I might see. The screen showed 247 unread messages, all from my own number. I didn't open them. I didn't want to know what they said. Instead, I tried calling Linda. The call went through. I could see it connecting, see the timer starting. But when I put the phone to my ear, all I heard was my own breathing. Like I was on the call with myself. Like the phone was somehow creating a closed loop with no connection to the outside world. I hung up and threw the phone onto the dash. The lights were still there, one ahead, one behind, maintaining their fixed distance. During the day, they looked different than they had at night. Less like headlights or lanterns and more like, I don't know how to describe it, like tears in the fabric of space, like holes through which something else was shining. The CB radio spoke in my voice again. "We told you not to come back." "Who's we?" I shouted at the radio. "Who the hell is we?" "Everyone who didn't make it out. Everyone who's still here, still driving. The road keeps us, Cole. It keeps us all." "That's not possible. That's not... How many of us do you think there are? Driving forever? Trying to find the end? Trying to get home?" The road collects us. Every few years, someone comes along who feels it, who senses that something's wrong. And some of those people, the curious ones, the ones who come back during the day to investigate, they don't leave. I wanted to argue, wanted to say this was impossible, wanted to insist that I was going to drive out of here just like I'd driven out last night, but I couldn't make the words come. Because deep down, I was starting to understand that I'd made a terrible mistake. Last night, I'd stumbled into this place by accident. And I'd escaped by accident, too. That curve in the road that had appeared out of nowhere. That had nearly made me crash. That hadn't been part of the normal road. That had been an exit, a way out. A momentary gap in whatever this place was. But I'd come back. I'd returned voluntarily during the day thinking I could understand it, thinking I could figure it out without consequences. And now the road had me. The abandoned rest area appeared on my right again, even though I'd been driving north, even though I'd left it behind miles ago. The same cracked pavement, the same rusted picnic tables. And standing by the bathroom building was that figure again, the one in the old-fashioned clothes. But now there were more of them, half a dozen figures standing in a loose group, all watching my truck pass, all wearing clothes from different eras, some modern, some decades old, some that looked like they were from even further back. One was wearing what looked like a military uniform from World War II. Another was in a dress that could have been from the 1970s. They all turned to watch me as I drove past, their featureless faces tracking my movement. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing my truck faster. 70 miles per hour, 80, 90. The figures didn't move, but somehow they stayed in view. Like the rest area was moving with me, keeping pace despite my speed. Then they were gone, and the rest area was gone. And I was back on the empty road with nothing but the lights ahead and behind and the dimming sun overhead. My odometer was frozen now. The numbers weren't advancing at all, no matter how fast I drove. I was burning fuel. I could see the fuel gauge dropping, but I wasn't covering any distance. I was running in place, running forever, caught in an infinite moment that stretched in all directions. I thought about that phrase the voice had used, "The road remembers everyone who passes through." What did that mean? Was this stretch of highway somehow recording the people who drove on it? And if so, what happened to those recordings? Did they just play out forever? Ghost drivers on a ghost road, trapped in an eternal loop? But I wasn't a recording. I could think, I could feel, I could make decisions. I was real. Wasn't I? The CB radio crackled with multiple voices now, all talking at once, all talking to me or about me. Shouldn't have come back. Tried to warn him. Been driving for years now. Feels like years. Can't remember what the outside looked like. Truck needs fuel, but there's nowhere to stop. The markers keep counting down, but they never reach zero. I grabbed the mic and screamed into it. How do I get out? There has to be a way out. Silence for a moment. Then my own voice, quiet and sad. We're still looking for it, all of us. Still driving, still searching. Some people say there's an exit, a specific moment, when the road lets you go. But no one knows when it is. Could be after an hour, could be after 100 years, could be never. That's not acceptable. I'm not staying here. I'm not... The truck lurched. It was a physical sensation, like hitting a pothole, but worse. Like the road itself had dropped away for a split second, and then snapped back. My teeth clacked together, and I bit my tongue hard enough to draw blood. When I looked up, the landscape had changed. It was darker now, much darker, like the sun had suddenly set even though my clock showed it was only 1:30 p.m. The road was different too, narrower, more cracked, with weeds growing through the pavement. And on either side, instead of the rolling sandhills I'd been seeing, there was nothing. Just flat, empty space stretching to a horizon that was too close, like the world had shrunk. The lights ahead and behind were brighter now, more prominent against the darkness. And as I watched, a third light appeared off to my left, then a fourth on my right, then more, until I was surrounded by a constellation of lights, all maintaining their distance, all watching. My fuel gauge was at a quarter tank. I'd burned through 3/4 of my fuel driving nowhere, achieving nothing. Eventually, I'd run out. And then what? Would I stop here forever, another static marker on this impossible road? Would I become one of those featureless figures, standing by the abandoned rest area, watching other doomed drivers pass by? I tried to think logically, tried to use my 17 years of driving experience to figure a way out of this. But normal logic didn't apply here. Distance didn't work right, time didn't work right, even basic cause and effect seemed unreliable. The only thing I could think to do was keep driving, because stopping felt like giving up, like accepting that this was permanent. As long as I was moving, as long as my wheels were turning, I could tell myself I still had a chance. My phone lit up one more time. Not with a message, but with a call. The caller ID showed Cole Briggs. I was calling myself again. I answered it. "Hello?" My own voice responded, but it sounded tired, defeated. "You'll figure it out eventually, or you won't. Most of us haven't." Figure what out? That it doesn't matter if you understand. Understanding doesn't help. The road doesn't care if you know what it is or how it works. It just is. That's not an answer. That's, "I've been driving for a long time, Cole." Or maybe it's only been a few hours. I can't tell anymore. The clock doesn't help. Nothing helps. You just keep driving and hope that eventually something changes. When did I couldn't even frame the question. Was I talking to myself from further along this same road? From years in the future, still trapped here? Or was this some other version of me from a parallel moment? Another Cole Briggs who'd made the same mistake? "Does it matter?" my own voice asked. "You're here now. That's all that matters. You're here, and so am I. And so are all the others. We're all still driving." The call ended. I looked at my fuel gauge. 1/8 of a tank left now. I'd be running on fumes soon. The lights around me had multiplied again. Dozens of them now, maybe hundreds, surrounding my truck like a crowd of spectators. Some were moving, not getting closer or farther, but shifting positions, swapping places with each other, creating patterns in the darkness. I realized they were other drivers, other trucks, other cars, other people who'd gotten caught on this road and never found the way out. All of us driving forever, burning fuel we didn't have, covering distance that didn't exist. My speedometer showed 95 miles per hour, the same speed I'd been going when I'd nearly crashed last night. The same speed that had somehow triggered that curve, that exit, that brief moment when the road had let me go. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe that was the way out. I pressed the accelerator all the way down. My truck's engine roared in protest, not designed for this kind of sustained high speed. Something under the hood was making that high-pitched whining sound again. The same sound I'd heard last night. 95, 98, 100. The lights around me were moving faster now, swirling, creating spirals and patterns. The road ahead remained perfectly straight, but I could feel something building, some kind of pressure or tension, like reality was straining under the stress of what I was doing. 105 miles per hour. 108. My fuel gauge was on empty now. The low fuel warning light was on. I had minutes left, maybe less. But the pressure was still building, the sensation that something was about to break or tear or give way. 112 miles per hour. The lights collapsed into a single point ahead of me, brilliant and blinding. I was driving straight toward it, my engine screaming, my whole truck shaking like it was going to come apart. The light rushed toward me, or I rushed toward it. And in that moment I understood. This was the exit. This was the way out. This was the gap between moments where the road loosened its grip just enough to let someone escape. I drove into the light. There was a sensation of falling, of spinning, of every direction becoming every other direction all at once. My truck was tumbling, or the world was tumbling around it, and I couldn't tell which. Then I was on a road again, a normal road, Route 83, heading south. The sun was setting ahead of me, orange and red and beautiful. My clock showed 6:47 p.m. My odometer showed 287,062 miles. I'd covered 46 miles from where I'd entered this nightmare, which was about right for the distance between the rest area and where I was now. My fuel gauge showed 1/8 of a tank, low, but not empty like it had been just moments before. Everything was normal, everything was fine, except I'd lost time. I'd been on Route 83 for hours, trapped in that impossible space, but according to my clock, it had only been a few hours since I'd first gotten on the highway at noon. Like time had compressed or folded or skipped. My phone rang. It was Linda. "Cole, why didn't you call? You said you'd call when you were an hour out." I tried to think of what to say. "I got delayed. I'm sorry. I'll be home soon." Are you okay? You sound strange. I'm fine. I'll tell you about it when I get home. But I wouldn't. Because how could I explain any of this? How could I put into words what I'd experienced? And even if I tried, even if I managed to describe it, would she believe me? Would anyone believe me? I drove the rest of the way home on autopilot, my mind still trying to process what had happened. I'd gotten out. Somehow I'd escaped. But I knew with absolute certainty that I'd been incredibly lucky. There were people still there, still driving. That figure at the rest area, those lights surrounding me, that voice on the phone that was me but wasn't me. All of them still trapped in that stretched and broken space, unable to find the exit, unable to break free, still driving, still looking for the end of a road that has no end. I got home just after 9 p.m. Linda met me at the door, worried and annoyed in equal measure. I hugged her tighter than I had in years, grateful to be touching something real, something solid, something that existed in normal space and time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those voices on the CB, about my own voice telling me they'd been driving for years. I thought about the messages I'd received from myself, warnings to turn back, admissions that some people never make it out. I pulled up my phone and, for the first time, opened those 247 messages I'd received from my own number. I read through them one by one, and each one was a variation on the same theme. You shouldn't have come back. Turn around while you still can. The road keeps us. I've been driving for 3 years. I've been driving for 8 years. I don't remember what home looks like anymore. The fuel gauge has been on empty for months, but the truck keeps running. I passed myself on the road today. We waved at each other. There are dozens of me now. Hundreds, maybe. All driving, all searching for the exit. If you're reading this, you got out. I'm glad. One of us made it. The last message was time-stamped from 3 years in the future. From 2022, even though this was 2019. I deleted all the messages and put my phone down. The next morning, I called my dispatcher and quit. I told him I was done with long-haul trucking, that I needed to find something else, something that kept me closer to home. He tried to talk me out of it, reminded me of my seniority and benefits, but I was firm. I haven't driven long-haul since that day. I got a job driving local deliveries, nothing that takes me more than 50 miles from home, nothing that requires overnight trips. I make less money, and sometimes Linda asks why I made such a drastic change, but I can't tell her the truth. I can't tell her that there's a stretch of road in Nebraska that isn't really a road at all, that it's a trap, a collection point, a place where the normal rules of space and time break down, that there are people there, drivers who got caught, who are still driving, still burning fuel that shouldn't exist, still trying to find their way home. I can't tell her that sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes with messages from my own number. Messages from versions of me who didn't make it out, who are still there, still trapped. Messages that say, "Still driving." I never answer them. I delete them as soon as they arrive. But they keep coming, every few weeks reminding me of what I escaped, reminding me of what I could have become. This happened in 2019. It's 2023 now, and I still think about it every day. I've tried to research Route 83, tried to find other people who've experienced what I did, but there's nothing. Just scattered mentions of signal loss and dead zones, nothing that captures the full horror of what that road actually is. Sometimes I wonder if I should warn people, if I should find a way to tell other truckers to avoid that stretch of highway, especially at night. But who would believe me? And what would I even say? Don't drive on Route 83 in northern Nebraska because you might get trapped in an impossible space where distance and time don't work. So I keep quiet. I do my local deliveries. I come home to Linda every night, and I try not to think about the people, the drivers, the travelers, the unlucky souls who took a wrong turn or stayed on the road too long, who are still there, still driving, still searching for an exit that most of them will never find. I got out, I escaped, but part of me is still there too. I know this because I've seen myself. 3 months ago, driving through Grand Island, I passed a truck stop and saw a semi that looked exactly like mine used to look. Same model, same color, same company logo, and behind the wheel, for just a moment, I saw myself. Older, more tired, but definitely me. Our eyes met as I drove past. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just nodded, like he understood, like he'd been expecting this. Then he was gone, and I convinced myself I'd imagined it. That it was just someone who looked like me. That it was coincidence. But my phone buzzed that night. Message from my own number. I saw you today. I'm glad you made it out. Don't worry about me. I'm still looking for the exit. I'll find it eventually. We all will. We have to. I didn't respond. What could I say? Instead, I deleted the message and turned off my phone. But even with my phone off, even lying in bed next to Linda, even in the safety of my own home, I could feel it. That stretch of road, that impossible space, still out there, still collecting people, still keeping its prisoners trapped in an eternal loop of driving and searching and hoping. And I knew that somewhere on Route 83, in a place between Thedford and Valentine where distance doesn't work properly and time folds in on itself, there are versions of me still driving, still burning fuel that shouldn't exist, still trying to get home, still hoping that the next curve, the next sign, the next moment will be the one where the road finally lets them go. I made it out, but I'm not sure how many of me didn't. And that's the part that keeps me awake at night. Not the fear that I'll end up back there. I'm careful now. I avoid that highway completely. I never drive at night if I can help it. No, what keeps me awake is the knowledge that there are other roads like that one. Other places where reality wears thin, where the normal rules stop applying, where people get trapped without ever understanding why. And the knowledge that any road, any highway, any stretch of asphalt could become one of those places. All it takes is the wrong conditions, the wrong time of night, the wrong moment of inattention. All it takes is one wrong turn. I got out, I was lucky, but luck runs out eventually. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder if I really got out at all. Or if this life, this home, this version of reality where I escaped, is just another loop, another trap, another impossible space where I'm still driving, still searching, still hoping to find the end. My name is Mason Dalton, and I've been hauling freight across the American heartland for 22 years. 22 years of watching the sun rise over cornfields in Iowa, set over mountains in Colorado, and everything in between. I've driven every major route, and most of the minor ones, logged over 3 million miles, and I thought I'd seen everything this country's roads had to offer. I was wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened in March of 2018, on a route I'd driven at least 50 times before. It was supposed to be routine, a simple overnight haul from Kansas City to Denver, carrying electronics and computer parts. Standard cargo, standard route, nothing out of the ordinary. I'd left Kansas City at 7 in the evening, planning to arrive in Denver by 7 the next morning. 12 hours of driving, maybe 13 with a fuel stop. I should have arrived on schedule. Instead, I lost 17 hours somewhere on Interstate 70 in western Kansas. 17 hours that I can't account for, that don't show up on any of my logs, that might as well have been erased from existence. But I remember every second of them. Let me start with what the day was like before everything went wrong. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably warm for March. The forecast had called for clear skies all the way to Colorado, and for once, the forecast was accurate. When I pulled out of the distribution center in Kansas City, the temperature was a comfortable 58 degrees. No wind, visibility unlimited. I remember thinking it was going to be an easy run, maybe too easy. After 22 years, you learn to be suspicious of trips that seem too straightforward. Something always goes wrong, a blown tire, unexpected construction, a snowstorm that wasn't supposed to hit for another day. But I pushed that thought aside and focused on the road ahead. The first 3 hours were perfect. I merged onto I-70 West and settled into that comfortable rhythm that long-haul drivers know so well. The radio was playing classic rock, my coffee was hot, and the road was mine. Traffic was light, just me and a few other semis scattered across the highway, all of us heading west into the gathering darkness. I'd made this run so many times that I barely had to think about it. I knew every exit, every rest stop, every truck stop with decent coffee. I knew where the speed traps were, where the road got rough, where the cell service cut out for a few miles. This was my territory, as familiar as my own driveway. Around 10 p.m., I crossed from Missouri into Kansas. The landscape flattened out even more, becoming that endless prairie that stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction. During the day, you can see forever out here. At night, it's just darkness and stars and the occasional set of headlights. I stopped for fuel in Salina, Kansas around 11:30. Nothing unusual about the stop. I filled up the tank, grabbed a sandwich and another coffee from the attached convenience store, used the bathroom, and was back on the road within 20 minutes. The attendant who rang me up was a kid, maybe 19 or 20, and we exchanged the usual pleasantries about the weather and road conditions. "Clear sailing all the way to Colorado," he said, handing me my receipt. "You picked a good night for it." "Appreciate it," I told him, and headed back out to my truck. That was the last normal interaction I had with another human being for a very long time. I got back on I-70 and continued west. The clock on my dashboard showed 11:52 p.m. According to my calculations, I'd reach the Colorado border around 2 in the morning, then push on to Denver from there. Right on schedule. The road stretched ahead of me, straight and empty. The white dashed lines in the center seemed to pulse in my headlights, creating a hypnotic rhythm. Left side of the road was darkness. Right side was darkness. Above me was a sky full of stars, more stars than you ever see near a city, so many they seemed to blur together into a milky haze. I was about an hour west of Salina when I noticed the first strange thing. My GPS made a sound I'd never heard before. Not the usual alert tone it made when recalculating a route or warning about traffic, but a harsh, discordant beep that made me glance down at the screen. The map had frozen. My position marker, the little blue triangle that shows where you are, was stuck in place, not moving even though I was clearly driving forward at 68 miles per hour. I tapped the screen a few times thinking maybe it had glitched. Nothing changed. Then the screen went black. I tried turning the GPS off and back on. Nothing happened. The power button didn't respond. The screen stayed dark, like the device had completely died. "Great," I muttered, setting it back in its holder. "Just great." It wasn't a disaster. I knew this route well enough to navigate without GPS. But it was annoying. The unit was less than a year old and shouldn't have been having problems. I made a mental note to get it looked at when I got to Denver. I kept driving. About 10 minutes later, my cell phone rang. It was my wife, Jenny. We'd been married for 19 years, and she was used to my irregular hours, but she always liked to check in at least once during overnight runs. I answered on the third ring. "Hey, babe." There was silence on the other end. Not the silence of an empty line, but the silence of a connection that was there, but not transmitting any sound. "Jenny, you there?" Still nothing. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen. The call was connected. I could see the timer counting up, but there was no sound at all. "Jenny, if you can hear me, I think there's something wrong with the connection. I'll try calling you back in a few minutes." I hung up and immediately tried calling her back. The phone showed full signal strength, 4 bars, but when I hit the call button, nothing happened. The screen just sat there showing calling, but the call never went through. I tried 3 more times with the same result. Then I tried calling my dispatcher, same problem. The phone acted like it was trying to connect, but the call never actually went through. This was getting weird. First the GPS, now my phone. 2 separate devices, both malfunctioning at the same time. I set the phone down and focused on driving. Whatever was causing the problem would probably clear up in a few miles. I'd driven through dead zones before, areas where cell service was spotty or non-existent. It was annoying, but not uncommon, especially in rural areas. But I'd never had a dead zone kill my GPS before. I glanced at my dashboard. Everything looked normal. Speed steady at 68. Fuel gauge showing 3/4 of a tank. Oil pressure good, temperature normal. The only instruments that weren't working were the electronic ones, GPS and phone. The radio was still working, though. I had it tuned to a classic rock station out of Hayes, and it was playing Fleetwood Mac. The signal was clear, no static or interference. That was something, at least. I drove for another 15 minutes, waiting for the phone to start working again. But when I checked it, it still showed full signal strength and still wouldn't make calls. That's when I noticed the mile marker. Mile marker 253. I'd passed it once already, about 10 minutes ago. I specifically remembered it because there'd been a dead deer on the shoulder right next to it, and I'd had to swerve slightly to avoid any debris in the road. But now I was passing mile marker 253 again, and there was the deer exactly where it had been before, in exactly the same position. I hit my brakes, bringing my speed down to 50, then 40. I was staring at that mile marker like it might suddenly explain itself, might somehow make sense of what I was seeing. Mile markers are sequential. They count up or down depending on which direction you're traveling. On I-70 heading west, they count down. Higher numbers in the east, lower numbers as you move west. I'd passed mile marker 253 10 minutes ago, which meant I should be somewhere around mile marker 243 by now. But there it was. Mile marker 253. Again. I slowed to a crawl, maybe 20 miles per hour, trying to figure out what was happening. Had I somehow turned around without realizing it? Had I taken an exit and looped back? But that was impossible. I'd been driving straight on I-70 the whole time. No exits, no turns, just straight ahead. I checked my mirrors. Behind me was empty highway, stretching back into darkness. No other vehicles in sight. Ahead of me was more empty highway. I brought my truck to a complete stop in the middle of the road. There was no traffic, no reason not to. I sat there with the engine idling, trying to think through what had just happened. The logical explanation was that I'd somehow gotten confused about which mile marker I'd passed. Maybe I'd seen 253 and thought I'd already passed it, but I hadn't. Maybe the deer was a different deer, just in a similar position. Maybe I was more tired than I thought, and my perception was off. But I didn't believe any of those explanations. I knew what I'd seen. I'd passed mile marker 253 10 minutes ago, driven for 10 minutes at highway speed, and somehow ended up back at mile marker 253. I'd driven in a circle without turning. That's impossible, the rational part of my brain insisted. You can't drive in a straight line and end up where you started. That's not how roads work. That's not how space works. But it had happened. I was certain of it. I picked up my phone to try calling Jenny again. To try calling anyone. To get some kind of confirmation that the outside world still existed. The phone showed full signal strength but still wouldn't connect calls. I tried the GPS. Still dead. Screen completely black. The radio was still playing, though. Now it was the Eagles. Hotel California. The signal was still clear and strong. I took a deep breath and put my truck back in gear. Whatever was happening, sitting here wasn't going to solve it. I'd keep driving, pay close attention to the mile markers, and see what happened. I brought my speed back up to 65 and watched the road ahead carefully. My headlights illuminated maybe 200 feet of highway, showing nothing but empty asphalt and painted lines. The landscape on either side was invisible in the darkness, just a vast emptiness that could have contained anything or nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then I saw the next mile marker. Mile marker 253. I was back at the same spot again, the same marker, the same dead deer on the shoulder. I'd driven for 5 minutes at 65 miles per hour. That should have covered more than 5 miles, and I was exactly where I'd started. This time I didn't stop. Something told me that stopping was a bad idea, that as long as I kept moving, I had a chance of breaking out of whatever this was. So I pressed on, keeping my speed steady, watching the mile markers. Mile marker 253 appeared again 7 minutes later. Then again, 4 minutes after that, then again, and again, and again. Each time, the interval was different. Sometimes I'd see it after 3 minutes of driving, sometimes after 10. But it kept appearing. That same mile marker, that same stretch of highway, that same dead deer. I was stuck in a loop, driving the same section of road over and over again, unable to move forward or backward. The 4th or 5th time I passed mile marker 253, I looked at my odometer. When I'd left Salina, it had read 2,847,392 miles. Now it read 2,847,401 miles. 9 miles. In what should have been 40 or 50 miles of driving, my odometer claimed I'd only gone 9 miles. But even that 9 miles was suspect, because I kept passing the same marker. If I was really driving in a loop, then even that small amount of distance was an illusion. I checked my fuel gauge. It had dropped from 3/4 to just over half. I was burning fuel at a normal rate, which meant my engine was running, my wheels were turning, I was consuming energy and creating motion. But that motion wasn't translating into actual distance traveled. My hands were getting sweaty on the wheel. I wiped them on my jeans one at a time, not wanting to let go of the steering wheel for more than a second. Some irrational part of me felt like if I stopped holding on, if I stopped actively steering, something worse would happen. The radio cut to static. It was sudden and jarring, the music replaced instantly by harsh white noise. I reached for the volume knob to turn it down, but before I could, the static resolved into something else. A voice. It wasn't clear enough to make out words, but it was definitely a voice. Male, I thought, speaking slowly and deliberately, the words just barely below the threshold of comprehension, like listening to someone talk in another room with the door almost closed. I leaned closer to the radio, trying to hear what the voice was saying. The static surged and receded, and fragments of words came through. Marker 253. Can't move forward. Been trying for. Doesn't change. Then the static swallowed the voice again, and a moment later, music came back on. A different song now. Tom Petty, Free Fallin'. I stared at the radio, my heart pounding. That voice hadn't been part of any radio broadcast. It had been too unclear, too fragmented, like someone trying to communicate through interference. And it had mentioned mile marker 253. My mouth was dry. I grabbed my water bottle from the cup holder and took a long drink, trying to calm my nerves. This was fine. This was all fine. There had to be a rational explanation for all of this. Some kind of atmospheric phenomenon, maybe, or some quirk of the terrain that was causing optical illusions and signal interference. But I didn't believe that. Not really. Mile marker 253 appeared ahead of me again. This time, I decided to try something different. As I approached the marker, I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, coming to a stop right next to it. The dead deer was about 10 feet ahead of me, illuminated by my headlights. I put the truck in park and sat there, engine idling. The radio was still playing. Now it was CCR, Bad Moon Rising, which seemed almost comically appropriate. My phone still showed full signal strength but wouldn't make calls. My GPS was still dead. I looked at the mile marker. It was standard issue. A small green rectangular sign with white numbers reading 253. Nothing unusual about it. Nothing that would suggest it was any different from the thousands of other mile markers on highways across the country. But it was different. This marker was special somehow. This marker was the center of whatever was happening to me. I grabbed a flashlight from my storage compartment and stepped out of the truck. The night air was cool but not cold, maybe in the mid-40s. There was no wind, which was unusual for Kansas. The prairie almost always has wind, day or night, but now the air was completely still. The silence was oppressive. No sounds of traffic, no distant machinery, no animals, nothing. Just the idle of my truck engine and the sound of my own breathing. I walked over to the mile marker and examined it closely. It looked completely normal. Metal post driven into the ground, sign attached with bolts, some rust around the edges. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. I turned and looked at the dead deer. It was a young buck, maybe 2 years old, lying on its side with its legs extended. There was no visible wound, no blood, nothing to indicate how it had died. It could have been hit by a car, or it could have just died and fallen there. Hard to tell in the darkness. I swept my flashlight across the surrounding area. The highway extended in both directions, straight as an arrow. The landscape on either side was flat prairie, brown grass and scrub brush. No trees, no buildings, nothing to break up the monotony. In the distance I could see. Actually, I couldn't see anything in the distance. The beam of my flashlight just seemed to stop after a certain point, like it was hitting a wall of darkness that it couldn't penetrate. I walked back to my truck, climbed in, and sat there for a moment trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to just stay here, parked on the shoulder, and wait for morning. Surely things would make more sense in daylight. Surely other vehicles would come along eventually, and I could flag someone down, get help. But another part of me, the part that had kept me alive and relatively sane through 22 years of long-haul trucking, was screaming at me to keep moving. Stopping felt like giving up. Stopping felt like accepting that this was my reality now, that I was trapped here. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. As soon as I started moving again, the radio cut to static once more. This time, the voice that came through was clearer. Mason Dalton, truck driver, hauling electronics to Denver. I nearly drove off the road. The voice knew my name. The voice knew what I was carrying. How? I started to say, then realized I was talking to a radio. But the voice continued as if it had heard me. I've been here for a long time, Mason. A very long time. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Who is this? I shouted at the radio. What's happening? The static surged, then cleared again. Mile marker 253. We're all at mile marker 253. All of us who got caught. Can you see us? I looked around frantically, checking my mirrors, scanning the highway ahead and behind. There was nothing, no other vehicles, no lights, no signs of anyone else. I don't see anyone, I said. You will, the voice replied. When you've been here long enough, you'll see us. We're all driving, Mason, all trying to find the next marker. Mile marker 252. It should be just a mile down the road, but none of us can reach it. The voice faded back into static, then the music returned. Journey, don't stop believin'. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was shaking now, my hands trembling on the wheel. This wasn't just equipment malfunction or atmospheric interference. This was something else, something I didn't have a framework to understand. Mile marker 253 appeared ahead of me once more. I'd been driving for almost 2 hours now, by my estimate, and I'd made 0 forward progress. I was caught in a loop, a section of highway that repeated endlessly, unable to reach the next marker. And according to that voice, I wasn't alone. I thought about what the voice had said. When you've been here long enough, you'll see us. How long was long enough? Hours, days, years? How long had that voice been trapped here? I didn't want to find out. I don't know how many times I passed mile marker 253 that first night. I lost count somewhere around 30 or 40. Each time I tried something different. I tried driving faster, pushing my truck up to 85 miles per hour, which was dangerous and probably stupid, but I was desperate. I tried driving slower, crawling along at 20 miles per hour, watching every detail of the road, looking for any variation or change. I tried pulling off onto the shoulder and waiting for exactly 10 minutes before continuing. I tried closing my eyes and counting to 60 before looking at the road again. Nothing worked. Mile marker 253 kept appearing, as inevitable as sunrise, as inescapable as gravity. My fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank. I'd been driving for what felt like 6 or 7 hours, burning through diesel at a steady rate, but getting nowhere. At this rate, I'd run out of fuel within a few hours. And then what? Would I be stuck here forever? A stationary landmark at mile marker 253, waiting for someone to find me. But who would find me? If this place worked the way it seemed to work, no one would ever reach me. They'd just keep passing mile marker 253 over and over, never seeing me, never knowing I was here, unless they'd been here long enough to see the others. The radio crackled again around what my clock insisted was 3 in the morning, though I had no way of knowing if that was accurate. Time felt strange here, elastic, like it was stretching and compressing in ways that didn't match the movement of clock hands. "Mason," the voice said, clearer this time, almost like someone speaking directly to me rather than through radio interference. "Mason, can you see them yet?" I checked my mirrors and scanned the road ahead. Still nothing. Just me and the endless highway and mile marker 253 approaching once again in the distance. "I don't see anyone," I said to the radio. "There's no one here." "Look closer. Look at the side of the road. Look at the spaces between." I didn't know what spaces between meant, but I looked more carefully at the side of the road as I drove. The shoulder, the grass beyond, the darkness that stretched out forever on either side. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by my headlights moving across the landscape. But as I looked closer, I realized it was a shape. A vehicle-shaped shadow parked on the shoulder maybe 100 yards ahead. As I got closer, it resolved into an actual truck. An 18-wheeler, similar to mine but older, painted in faded blue and white. It was parked at an angle, partially on the shoulder, partially on the road, like the driver had pulled over in a hurry or without much care for positioning. The truck's lights were on, headlights, running lights, even the interior cabin light. But there was something wrong about the light. It looked faded somehow, washed out, like I was seeing it through a filter or a haze. I slowed down as I approached, bringing my truck to a stop about 50 feet away. I could see into the cabin of the other truck now. There was someone in the driver's seat, a figure sitting motionless behind the wheel, hands at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of my truck. The night air felt different than it had before. Thicker, somehow, like there was more substance to it. The silence was even more complete. I couldn't even hear my own truck engine anymore, even though I could see the exhaust pipe still emitting fumes. I walked slowly toward the other truck, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As I got closer, I could see the figure in the cabin more clearly. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing a trucker's cap and a flannel shirt. He was absolutely motionless, not even seeming to breathe. "Hey," I called out. "You okay?" No response. The man didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. He just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring forward. I walked up to the driver's side door and knocked on the window. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. Up close, I could see that the man's eyes were open but unfocused, like he was looking at something very far away, or at nothing at all. His skin had a grayish tint that I told myself was just the poor lighting, but I didn't really believe it. I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. The door swung open, and I immediately wished I hadn't opened it. The man was still sitting there, unmoving, but now I could see him more clearly. He wasn't breathing. There was no rise and fall of his chest, no pulse visible in his neck. And his skin wasn't just gray, it was almost translucent, like I was looking at a projection rather than a real person. "Jesus," I breathed, stepping back. The man's head turned toward me. It was slow, mechanical, like movement that hadn't been practiced in a very long time. His unfocused eyes found mine, and I saw a flash of recognition, of awareness, of something that might have been relief or terror or both. His mouth opened. No sound came out at first, just a dry, clicking noise, like he was trying to remember how to make his vocal cords work. Then, in a voice that sounded like wind through dead leaves, "How long?" I didn't know how to answer that. How long what? How long had he been here? How long had I been here? "I don't know," I said. "I've been here for a few hours, I think, since around midnight." The man's head shook slowly back and forth. "No, longer. Much longer." "How long have you been here?" His eyes unfocused again, looking through me rather than at me. "I don't remember. Started in November, there was snow. Then, no snow, then snow again. Then summer. Then, I stopped counting." My blood ran cold. He was describing months, maybe years. "What's your name?" I asked. "Wyatt. Wyatt something. I can't remember the rest." "Wyatt, when did you get stuck here? What year?" He blinked slowly, processing the question. 2014? No. 13? I was hauling. He trailed off, the thought leaving his mind before he could complete it. If he was telling the truth, he'd been here for 5 years. "Wyatt, listen to me. How do we get out? There has to be a way out." His eyes focused on me again, and for a moment, there was clarity there. A flash of the person he'd been before this place had hollowed him out. Mile marker 252. Have to reach 252. 1 mile, just 1 mile, but can't get there. "Have you tried? Tried everything?" He interrupted, his voice gaining a little strength. "Faster, slower, backwards, waiting. Nothing works. Always come back to 253. Always. What about the others? I asked, remembering the voice on the radio. The voice said there were others. Wyatt's head turned, looking past me down the highway. They're here. All of us. Stuck at 253. You'll see them eventually, when you've been here long enough. When you start to fade. I looked down at my hands. They looked normal to me. Solid, real, fully present. But I remembered how Wyatt had looked when I'd first seen him in his truck, how faded and washed out he'd appeared. Was that what would happen to me if I stayed here long enough? Would I become like him, translucent and ghostly, trapped in an eternal moment at mile marker 253? There has to be a way out, I said again, more to convince myself than him. Wyatt's attention drifted away again, his eyes losing focus. Marker 252. 1 mile away. Just 1 mile. Been trying. So long. He stopped responding after that. His hands stayed on the wheel, his eyes stayed open. But it was like whatever spark of consciousness that had animated him for those few minutes had been exhausted. He was there, but not there. Present, but absent. A recording of a person rather than an actual person. I backed away from his truck slowly, then turned and walked quickly back to mine. My hands were shaking as I climbed into the cabin and locked the doors, even though I knew locks wouldn't protect me from whatever was happening here. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I'd just seen. Wyatt had been here since 2013. 5 years, trapped in this loop, driving and getting nowhere, slowly fading away until he was barely even present anymore. 5 years. How long would it take before I ended up like him? How long before I couldn't remember my own last name, before my skin took on that translucent quality, before I became just another ghost haunting mile marker 253? I put my truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway, leaving Wyatt sitting in his faded truck. As I drove away, I checked my rearview mirror and saw him pull back onto the highway behind me, maintaining his position on the wheel, driving forward even though forward didn't mean anything here. The radio crackled. You see now. You see what we become. How many? I asked the radio. How many people are stuck here? 12, 15, 20. Hard to count. Some fade away completely eventually. Some are still clear enough to see. We're all here, Mason. All driving. All trying to reach 252. There has to be a way out, I said. And I realized I'd said the same thing to Wyatt just a few minutes ago. How many times had each of these trapped drivers said the same thing? How many times had they told themselves there had to be an escape, had to be a solution, had to be a way to break the pattern? And they were all still here. Mile marker 253 appeared ahead. As I approached it, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Another truck on the shoulder, and another beyond that. 3 trucks total, including Wyatt's, all parked in roughly the same area, all with their lights on, all with figures visible in the driver's seats. I drove past them slowly, looking into each cabin. Each one contained a driver, sitting behind the wheel, hands at 10 and 2, staring forward. Some looked more solid than others. One was barely visible at all, just a faint outline that I might have been imagining. They'd all been here for different amounts of time, I realized. The more faded they were, the longer they'd been trapped. Wyatt had been here since 2013 and was still visible enough to talk to. But some of these others, they'd been here for decades, maybe longer, trapped in an endless loop, slowly dissolving into nothing. As I passed the last truck, its driver turned his head and looked at me. I couldn't make out any features. He was too faded, too transparent. But I felt the weight of his gaze, and then he raised one hand and pointed forward, down the highway, toward where mile marker 252 should be. "Keep trying," the gesture said. "Keep looking. Don't end up like us." I drove on. My clock showed 4:47 a.m. now. Back in the real world, the sun would be rising soon. But here, the darkness remained absolute, unchanging. The sky above showed stars. The same stars I'd been seeing all night, in exactly the same positions. The moon hadn't moved. Nothing had moved except me and the other trapped drivers, all of us going nowhere. I tried my phone again. Still showed full signal strength, still wouldn't make calls. I tried the GPS, still dead. The radio was still my only connection to the voice, to the others, and even that was intermittent. My fuel gauge showed less than a quarter tank now. Maybe 2 or 3 hours of driving left before I ran out completely. What would happen then? Would my truck just sit here on the highway? Another permanent fixture at mile marker 253? Would I sit behind the wheel like Wyatt and the others, hands at 10 and 2, slowly fading away over years or decades until I was barely visible? Or would something worse happen? I realized I'd been assuming that being trapped here was the worst possible outcome. But what if it wasn't? What if running out of fuel triggered something else? Something even more terrible? The radio crackled. "Don't let the fuel run out." "What happens if it does?" I asked. Static for a moment, then, "We don't know. None of us have ever run completely dry. We've all had just enough to keep moving. That's part of it, we think. The loop provides just enough fuel to keep you driving. But if you run out, if the engine stops," the voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. If the engine stopped, if you stopped moving, something bad would happen. Something worse than being trapped. So I just keep driving forever? That's the only option? Unless you find the exit. Some of us think there's an exit. A moment when the loop breaks, when 252 becomes reachable, but none of us have found it. How long have you been here? I don't remember. Long enough that I can't recall what my wife looked like. Long enough that I've forgotten the sound of my own daughter's voice. Long enough that I'm more here than I ever was anywhere else. The resignation in the voice was heartbreaking. This person, whoever they were, had given up. They'd accepted their fate and were just existing. Driving forever. Marking time. Waiting for nothing because there was nothing to wait for. I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't accept that. Mile marker 253 appeared again. This time, as I passed it, I saw something new. A fourth truck parked behind the others. This one was more modern than Wyatt's, newer model, painted dark green, and the driver was visible enough that I could make out actual features. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, with short dark hair and a leather jacket. She was looking at me as I passed, and unlike the others, she wasn't just staring blankly forward. There was awareness in her eyes, recognition, urgency. She was gesturing at me, waving her arms, pointing at something. I couldn't tell what she was pointing at, the road ahead, the shoulder, mile marker 253 itself. I slowed down, considering whether to stop and talk to her. She looked more lucid than Wyatt had been, more present. Maybe she'd figured something out. Maybe she knew something the others didn't. But before I could make a decision, my truck lurched. It was similar to the sensation I'd experienced that first time back on Route 83, but more violent. Like the road had dropped away and then snapped back, but with more force. My teeth clacked together, and I bit my tongue. The taste of blood filled my mouth. When I looked up, everything had changed. The trucks on the shoulder were gone. All four of them, including the woman in the green truck, had simply vanished. The road ahead looked different too, darker somehow, like someone had turned down the ambient light level. And the stars above, the stars were different. Different positions, different constellations, like I was suddenly looking at the sky from a different latitude. My clock now showed 2:33 a.m. I'd lost time, or gained it, or jumped sideways into a different moment entirely. This had happened before on Route 83, but it felt different here, more deliberate. Like the loop wasn't just repeating, it was shifting, changing, moving through different versions of itself, and each version, I suspected, was its own trap. I was about to discover just how many traps this place had waiting. Mile marker 253 appeared again, but this time it looked different. The sign itself was the same, green metal with white numbers, but the post was on the wrong side of the road. Before, it had been on the right side of the highway heading west. Now it was on the left side. The dead deer was gone too, replaced by nothing, just empty shoulder. I slowed down, staring at the marker. Everything about it was identical except for its position. It was like someone had taken the section of highway I'd been trapped in and flipped it, creating a mirror image. Or maybe I'd shifted into a parallel version of the loop, a different layer of the same trap. My fuel gauge still showed less than a quarter tank, same as before the shift. My clock still showed 2:33 a.m. But outside, the darkness had deepened, and the quality of the silence had changed. It felt heavier now, more oppressive, like the air itself was pressing down on my truck. I tried the radio. Nothing but static now, not even the voice that had been speaking to me. I tried my phone, same as before. Full signal strength, but no ability to make calls. The GPS was still dead, screen black and unresponsive. I was completely isolated now. No contact with the outside world, no contact with the other trapped drivers, no way to navigate except to keep following the highway and hoping something would change. I pressed on, watching for mile marker 253 to appear again. It did, about 8 minutes later, still on the wrong side of the road. The deer was still absent. Everything else looked the same. Same empty highway, same flat prairie on either side, same stars above in their new, unfamiliar configurations. I drove for what felt like hours, though my clock insisted only 30 minutes had passed. Each time mile marker 253 appeared, I checked to see if anything had changed. Sometimes the marker was on the right side, sometimes on the left. Sometimes there was debris on the shoulder, a blown tire, a piece of shredded rubber from a retreaded tire, and sometimes the shoulder was clean. The variations were small but consistent enough that I could tell I was cycling through different versions of the same loop. It was like being trapped in a deck of cards that was being endlessly shuffled. Each time through, I got a slightly different hand, but it was always the same cards. Always mile marker 253, always the same section of highway going nowhere. My fuel gauge dropped to 1/8 of a tank. I was running out of time. Whatever was going to happen when my fuel ran out, it was going to happen soon. Maybe within the hour, maybe sooner if I kept driving at highway speeds. The voice on the radio had warned me not to let the fuel run out. But they hadn't told me what would happen if it did, and I was starting to think they didn't know, that no one had ever actually run completely dry because the loop somehow prevented it, somehow ensured there was always just enough fuel to keep driving. But what if I was different? What if the rules were changing? What if the shift I'd experienced had broken something fundamental about how this trap worked? I decided to try an experiment. I pulled over onto the shoulder and put the truck in park. Then I shut off the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming. Without the engine noise, without the road noise, there was nothing. Just absolute, complete silence. I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat. I sat there for 60 seconds, counting them off in my head. When I reached 60, I turned the key and started the engine again. It caught immediately, rumbling back to life. I checked the fuel gauge. Still 1/8 of a tank, same as before. Shutting off the engine hadn't caused it to drop further, which was good. That meant I could potentially stretch my remaining fuel by stopping periodically, but it also meant I had to test what the voice had warned me about. What happened if I stopped? What was the consequence of not driving? I waited, engine idling, watching the darkness around me. Nothing happened. 1 minute became 2, then 5, then 10. My clock ticked forward normally. The stars above stayed in their new positions. Mile marker 253 was visible about 50 yards ahead of me, patiently waiting. Nothing happened. Maybe the voice had been wrong. Maybe stopping was fine. Maybe the real danger was something else entirely. I was about to put the truck back in gear when I noticed something in my side mirror. There was a light behind me. A single point of light, maybe a half-mile back, on the highway. At first, I thought it might be another vehicle. Someone else who'd gotten caught in the loop. But the light wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, fixed in place, like a lamppost or a beacon. I watched it in the mirror for a full minute. It didn't move, didn't change, didn't do anything. Just existed. A point of illumination in the darkness behind me. Then, suddenly, it was closer. Not closer as in it had moved toward me. Closer as in the distance between us had suddenly decreased without any apparent motion. It had been a half-mile away, and now it was maybe a quarter-mile away. But I hadn't seen it move. It had just jumped. I put the truck in gear and started driving. In my mirror, the light jumped closer again. Now it was only a few hundred yards behind me, close enough that I could see it wasn't a single light but multiple lights arranged in a pattern. Like headlights. Like a truck's headlights. But there was something wrong with the pattern. The spacing was off, the angles were wrong. Like someone had assembled a truck's lighting array from memory and gotten the details slightly incorrect. I accelerated, bringing my speed up to 70. The light pattern followed, maintaining its distance now rather than jumping closer. I could see it clearly in my mirrors. It looked like a semi-truck, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, or too narrow, or something I couldn't quite identify. Like a truck-shaped thing, rather than an actual truck. Mile marker 253 appeared ahead. As I passed it, I checked my mirror again. The truck-shaped thing was still following me, still maintaining its distance. But now I could see there was something wrong with the way it moved. It didn't sway or bounce the way real trucks do when driving on asphalt. It just glided, perfectly smooth, like it was on rails. Or like it wasn't really there at all. The radio burst to life with a screech of static that made me jump. Through the noise, I could hear a voice. Not the same voice as before, but a new one, urgent and frightened. Don't let it catch you. Whatever you do, don't stop. Don't let it catch you. What is it? I shouted at the radio. We don't know. It comes when you stop too long. It follows. If it catches you, the voice cut off, replaced by static and then silence. I looked in the mirror again. The truck thing was closer now, definitely closer, maybe only 50 yards behind me. I could see into its cabin, could see that there was something behind the wheel, something person-shaped but not quite right, moving in jerky, mechanical ways. I floored the accelerator. My truck wasn't built for speed, but I pushed it as hard as I could. 75, 80, 85. The engine screamed in protest, but I didn't ease off. I had to put distance between me and whatever was following me. Mile marker 253 flashed by, and again, and again. Each time I checked my mirror, and each time the truck thing was a little farther behind. After the 5th or 6th marker, I couldn't see it anymore. It had either given up or fallen too far back to be visible. I eased off the accelerator, bringing my speed down to a more sustainable 70. My heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through my system. What the hell had that thing been? Another trapped driver who'd been here so long they'd transformed into something else. Or something that was never human to begin with, something that existed in this place naturally. I didn't want to find out. My fuel gauge was below 1/8 now, hovering just above empty. The low fuel warning light was on, had been on for a while. I had maybe 30 minutes of driving left, maybe less. And when the fuel ran out, when my engine died, I'd be sitting still, vulnerable to whatever that thing was. I had to find a way out before that happened. Mile marker 253 appeared again, and this time I noticed something I'd missed before. There was writing on the back of the sign, the side facing west, the direction I was traveling. It looked like it had been scratched there with a key or a knife. Rough letters carved into the metal. Look between. I slowed down and stared at the message as I passed. Look between what? Between mile markers? Between the lanes? Between dimensions? The radio crackled. Between the moments. Between the loops. That's where the exit is. How? I asked. How do I look between moments? The shift. When you feel the shift, when the loop changes, that's when the space opens. That's when 252 becomes reachable. But you have to be ready. You have to be watching. I'd felt the shift before, that lurching sensation, like the road dropping and snapping back. It had happened twice now. Once on Route 83, once earlier tonight when the other trucks had vanished, and my clock had changed. If I could anticipate the next shift, if I could be ready for it, maybe I could break out during that moment of transition. Maybe that's what the scratched message meant. Look for the gap between loops. The instant when one version of the trap was ending and another was beginning. But how could I prepare for something I couldn't predict? I kept driving, watching carefully for any sign that another shift was coming. The landscape stayed constant. Flat prairie, darkness, stars above. Mile marker 253 appeared at irregular intervals, sometimes after 2 minutes of driving, sometimes after 10. My fuel gauge continued its relentless drop toward empty. Then I felt it, a tingling sensation, like static electricity building up in the air around me. The hair on my arms stood up. The radio hissed with interference. The darkness outside seemed to waver slightly, like heat shimmer on a summer road. A shift was coming. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and focused on the road ahead. If the exit was going to appear, it would be now, during this transition between loops. I had to be ready to take it, had to be ready to do whatever was necessary to break free. The tingling intensified. My truck began to vibrate. Not from the engine, but from something else. Something external. The stars above started to blur, their positions shifting and sliding across the sky. And then the road dropped. It was the same sensation as before, but much more violent. My truck fell, or the world fell around my truck, and for a moment I was weightless, suspended in nothingness. Everything went dark. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of absolute darkness, deeper than any night. Then reality snapped back. But it snapped back wrong. When I could see again, when my eyes adjusted to the sudden return of light, I realized I was no longer on the highway. I was still in my truck, still behind the wheel, but the road beneath me had changed. Instead of asphalt, I was driving on dirt. Not a dirt road exactly, but bare earth, packed and uneven, with no markings or painted lines. The landscape on either side had changed too. Instead of flat prairie, there were hills now, rolling mounds of earth that looked almost like burial mounds or ancient earthworks. My speedometer showed I was still going 70 miles per hour, but the truck wasn't bouncing or shaking the way it should on rough terrain. It was smooth, too smooth, like I was hydroplaning across the surface rather than actually touching it. and ahead of me, maybe 100 yards away, I saw it. Mile marker 252, not 253. Not another repetition of the marker I'd been trapped at for hours. But 252, the next marker, the one that should have been impossible to reach. I'd done it. I'd found the exit, the gap between loops, the moment when the trap could be broken. Or so I thought. As I got closer to mile marker 252, I started to notice things that were wrong. The marker itself was larger than it should be. Not by much, but noticeably bigger than a standard mile marker. And it was glowing, emitting a faint phosphorescent light that had no apparent source. The dirt road ahead split just past the marker, branching into two paths. One continued forward, heading into the hills. The other curved back to the right, looping around in a wide arc. Neither path looked like Interstate 70. Neither path looked like any road I'd ever seen. I slowed down as I approached the marker, bringing my speed down to 40, then 30, then 20. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, that this wasn't the escape I'd been hoping for. I came to a stop right next to mile marker 252. Up close, I could see that the numbers weren't quite right. They looked like 252, but the digits were slightly malformed, like someone had tried to recreate them from a damaged template. And the glow I'd noticed, it was coming from inside the numbers themselves, like they were made of some luminescent material. I sat there, engine idling, trying to decide what to do. Should I take one of the paths ahead? Should I turn around and go back? But go back to what? The endless loop at mile marker 253. My fuel gauge was on E now. The engine was running on fumes, on borrowed time. I had minutes left at most. The radio crackled one final time. You found it. You found 252, but it's not the exit, Mason. It's deeper. It's the center. The center of what? The trap. 252 is where we all end up eventually. 253 is where you get caught. 252 is where you stay. No, I said. No, I'm not staying. I'm getting out of here. There is no out. There's only deeper. You chose the wrong path when you came back during the day on Route 83. You chose to investigate instead of forgetting. And now you're here. Now you're at 252. I looked at the two paths ahead of me. Which way? I asked. Which way is out? Neither. Both. It doesn't matter. They all lead to the same place. They all lead deeper into the markers. 251, 250, 249. Each one deeper than the last. Each one harder to leave. I realized what the voice was telling me. This wasn't a linear trap with a clear exit at the end. This was nested traps, one inside another, going down forever. Mile marker 253 had been the outer layer. 252 was deeper. And if I kept going, if I chose one of these paths, I'd end up at 251, then 250, then further and further down until I was so deep in the trap that I wouldn't even remember the surface existed. Then I go back, I said. I turn around. I go back to 253. You can try, but 253 is locked now. You pass through. You can't go back through a door that's closed behind you. I put my truck in reverse and turned around. The dirt road behind me stretched back into the hills, disappearing into darkness. I couldn't see mile marker 253 anymore. Couldn't see where I'd come from. But I tried anyway. I drove back the way I'd come, retracing my path, hoping to find the moment when dirt became asphalt again, when this nightmare landscape would transition back into something recognizable. My engine sputtered. The fuel was gone. I was running on whatever dregs remained in the lines, and even those were running out. The engine died. My truck coasted to a stop in the middle of the dirt road, surrounded by those strange earthwork hills, under a sky full of stars that didn't belong to any constellation I knew. Silence. Complete and absolute silence. I sat there, hands on the dead steering wheel, waiting for whatever was going to happen next. Nothing happened. Seconds became minutes. Minutes became... I don't know. Time felt strange again, elastic, like it wasn't moving at the same rate anymore. I tried my phone one last time. The screen lit up. It still had battery at least, and I saw that I had a signal now. Not 4 bars or 5 bars, but some signal. Something. I called Jenny. The call connected. I heard ringing, once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice. Hello? Jenny. I almost sobbed with relief. Jenny, I'm Mason. Where are you? We've been trying to reach you for days. Your dispatcher said you never made the delivery. What happened? Days, she said, days. What day is it? I asked. It's Friday morning. You were supposed to call me Wednesday night. Where have you been? Wednesday to Friday. I'd lost more than a day. I'd lost almost 2 full days to the loop at mile marker 253. I'm in Kansas, I said. Somewhere in western Kansas. I got lost. My GPS stopped working and Mason, your truck's GPS shows you haven't moved. It's been sitting in the same spot for 2 days. Your dispatcher was about to call the police. What spot? Where does it say I am? A pause while she checked. Interstate 70, mile marker 253. Of course, the GPS showed me at 253, because that's where I was. That's where I'd always been. I'd never actually left. Listen to me, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I need you to tell me exactly what the GPS shows. I need to know if there's anything unusual about the location. Another pause. It just shows you on I-70, about halfway between Hayes and the Colorado border. There's nothing there, Mason. Just highway. Can you see any other trucks nearby? Any other GPS signals? No, just yours. Why? What's happening? I looked out my windshield at the dirt road, at the earthwork hills, at mile marker 252, glowing softly in the distance. Then I looked at my phone, at the connection to Jenny, to the real world. And I understood. I was in 2 places at once. Physically, my truck was still sitting at mile marker 253 on Interstate 70, visible to GPS satellites, a stationary object in the real world. But consciously, mentally, I was here, in this deeper layer of the trap, at mile marker 252. My body was at 253. My mind was at 252. Mason, are you still there? I'm here, I said, but I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. Stay where you are, Jenny said. I'm calling the highway patrol right now. They'll come to find you. Don't, I said quickly. Don't send anyone. Why not? Because I didn't know what would happen if someone found my truck at mile marker 253. Would they see me sitting in the driver's seat, catatonic and unresponsive like Wyatt? Would I be translucent, fading, already halfway to becoming a ghost? Or would they find an empty truck, my body long gone, taken somewhere else entirely? Just give me a few more hours, I said. I'll figure this out. Mason, you're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry, but I need you to trust me. Don't send anyone yet. We talked for a few more minutes, but I could hear the worry and confusion in her voice. She didn't understand what was happening, and I couldn't explain it in any way that would make sense. Eventually, I promised to call her back in 2 hours, and we hung up. I sat in my dead truck, on a dirt road that didn't exist, and tried to think. The voice on the radio had said you couldn't go back through a closed door, but maybe you didn't have to go back. Maybe you could go forward. Maybe if I went deep enough, if I descended through enough mile markers, I'd eventually reach the bottom. And at the bottom, there might be another way out, or there might be nothing. Just the final trap. The deepest layer where people went and never returned. I looked at mile marker 252 again, at the two paths branching beyond it. Forward into the hills, or curving back to the right. Either way led to 251, the voice had said. Either way led deeper. I made a decision. I got out of my truck. The moment my feet hit the dirt, I felt it. A pulling sensation, like gravity had suddenly increased, like the earth beneath me was hungry. I stumbled, nearly fell, caught myself on the truck's mirror. The silence was even more oppressive outside the cabin. It pressed against my eardrums, made my head ache. The air was thick and hard to breathe, like I was at high altitude even though the landscape was flat. I started walking toward mile marker 252. Each step felt like walking through water. The air resisted my movement, pushed back against me. But I kept going, one foot in front of the other, moving forward because there was nothing else to do. When I reached the marker, I stopped and looked at it closely. The glowing numbers seemed to pulse slowly, like a heartbeat, and carved into the metal post below the numbers, I saw more scratched writing. Going down. Keep going down until you reach 0. I looked at the two paths ahead of me. They both led down, literally. I could see now that they both descended into the hills, disappearing into darkness. One way or another, they both led to lower mile markers, to deeper traps, to 0. What was at 0? Was that the bottom of the trap? The final layer where escape was either possible or impossible forever? I chose the left path, the one that went straight, and started walking. The darkness closed in around me quickly. Within a few steps, I couldn't see my truck anymore. Within a dozen steps, I couldn't see mile marker 252. There was just the dirt path beneath my feet and the vague outlines of hills on either side. I don't know how long I walked. It might have been minutes or hours. Time didn't work properly here, and my phone's clock had stopped updating, frozen at the moment I'd gotten out of the truck. But eventually, I saw light ahead. Another glowing marker. Mile marker 251. I'd descended one level, gone one layer deeper. The marker looked similar to 252, but somehow worse. The numbers were more malformed. The glow was a sickly green color, and the metal post was corroded and pitted, like it had been standing there for centuries. Beyond it, the path split again. More choices. More ways to go deeper. I kept walking, mile marker 250, mile marker 249, mile marker 248. Each one glowed with that same phosphorescent light. Each one more deteriorated than the last. The landscape around me changed as I descended. The hills became sharper, more angular, less like natural formations, and more like architectural structures. The sky above disappeared entirely, replaced by a darkness so complete it seemed solid. I was inside something now, deep inside, like I'd descended into the earth itself, or into some space that existed beneath reality. Mile marker 200, mile marker 150, mile marker 100. I'd stopped trying to count how many I'd passed. My legs ached from walking, but I couldn't stop. Some instinct told me that stopping here at any of these deeper markers would be worse than stopping at 253 or 252. Down here, the trap had teeth. Mile marker 50. The path was narrower now, barely wide enough to walk on. On either side, there were no longer hills but walls, smooth, featureless surfaces that absorbed light. The marker at 50 was barely readable, the numbers almost completely corroded away. I kept going. Mile marker 25. Mile marker 10. Mile marker 5. The walls on either side were closing in. I had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The marker at 5 was tiny, almost lost in the narrowness of the passage. Mile marker 1. And beyond it, in the distance, I saw something different. Not a glowing marker, not another number, but a light, a real light, warm and yellow and inviting. It looked like sunlight, like daylight, like the world above. I started running, or tried to. The passage was too narrow, the air too thick, but I moved as fast as I could, driven by desperate hope. Mile marker 0. It was there. I'd reached it. The bottom of the trap. The marker at 0 was different from all the others. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't corroded. It looked brand new, freshly installed, the numbers crisp and clear. And attached to the post below the marker was a small metal plate with an inscription. You are here. You have always been here. This is where all roads end. Beyond mile marker 0, the passage opened up into a space. A chamber or room or something I didn't have words for. And in that space, in that impossibility, I saw my truck. Not a dirt-covered version from this place. Not a faded ghost image like Wyatt's truck, but my actual truck, looking exactly as it had when I'd left it, sitting in the middle of this chamber with its lights on and its engine running. I walked toward it, moving like I was in a dream. When I reached it, when I opened the door and climbed into the cabin, everything felt real. The seat, the steering wheel, the dashboard, all solid, all present, all exactly as they should be. My phone rang. I answered it. Mason? Jenny's voice, clear and close. Mason, where are you? Are you okay? I looked around the chamber, at mile marker 0 behind me, at the impossible space I was sitting in. I'm coming home. The highway patrol found your truck. You're not in it. Where are you? I looked down at myself, at my hands on the steering wheel, at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked solid. I looked real. But Jenny was telling me I wasn't in my truck. I'm here, I said. I'm sitting in the driver's seat right now. Mason, you're not. The truck is empty. They're searching the area. They think you might have wandered off, might be hurt or confused. Where are you? I realized what had happened. What must have happened. I'd gone too deep. I'd descended through too many markers, passed through too many layers of the trap. And somewhere along the way, maybe at 252, maybe at 100, maybe at 0, I'd crossed a threshold. I'd left my body behind. The me, sitting in this truck, in this impossible chamber, was a copy, a recording, a consciousness that had been separated from its physical form. Jenny, I said slowly, I need you to listen carefully. In my truck, in the glove compartment, there's a notebook. I write down all my routes, all my stops. Get that notebook and look at the last entry. A pause, then, okay, the police are getting it now. Hold on. I waited. Around me, the chamber began to change. The walls were becoming transparent, revealing what lay beyond them. Other chambers, other trucks, other drivers sitting in their vehicles, all at mile marker 0, all at the end of all roads. Some of them looked substantial, real. Others were transparent, ghostly, and a few were barely visible at all, just suggestions of form, echoes of people who'd been here so long they'd almost completely faded away. We were all here, all the trapped drivers, all the people who'd gotten caught in these loops and descended too far to return. This was where we ended up. This was the collection point. Mason, Jenny's voice bringing me back. The notebook just says Kansas City to Denver, I-70, electronics. Nothing unusual. Look at the date. Another pause. It says Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. What's today's date? It's Friday, March 16th, 2018. Why? I looked at my clock. It still showed 2:33 a.m., the time it had shown since the shift at mile marker 253. But Jenny was saying it was 3 days later. I'd lost 3 days to the loops and the descent. "There's something else," Jenny said, her voice shaking. "Mason, the police are saying, they're saying it looks like the truck's been sitting there for weeks, not days. There's dust, and the engine's completely cold, and the seat is... They're saying the seat is deteriorated, like it's been exposed to weather for a long time. Weeks, not days. Weeks, or maybe more." "I love you," I said to Jenny. "I want you to know that. I love you, and I'm sorry. Mason, what's happening? You're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry." I hung up before she could respond. Around me, the other drivers in their trucks were moving now, stirring, becoming aware of my presence. Some turned to look at me. Some raised their hands in greeting or warning. One, an elderly man in a truck so old it must have been from the 1970s, pointed at mile marker 0, then pointed down, indicating there was further to go. But I was done descending. I was at the bottom. This was as far down as I could go. Or was it? I looked at mile marker 0 again, at the inscription on the plate. This is where all roads end. But roads don't end. They connect. They lead somewhere. Even a dead end is still connected to the road network, still part of the system. I got out of my truck and walked back to mile marker 0. The other drivers watched me, curious, perhaps wondering what I was going to do. I grabbed the marker post and pulled. It didn't budge at first, but I kept pulling, putting my full weight into it, and slowly it began to move. The metal groaned, the earth around its base cracked, and finally, with a sound like tearing fabric, the marker came free. Where the marker had been, there was a hole. Not a hole in the ground, but a hole in space itself. A dark opening that didn't reflect light, that seemed to absorb everything, even attention. I looked into the hole and saw nothing. No, not nothing. I saw the absence of everything. A void where reality simply stopped. This was the true bottom, not mile marker 0, but what lay beneath it, the foundation upon which the trap was built. I took a deep breath and jumped in. The fall was instantaneous and eternal. I fell through darkness and light and colors that didn't have names. I fell through every mile marker I'd ever passed, through every road I'd ever driven, through every moment of my 22 years as a trucker. And then I stopped falling. I was sitting in my truck on Interstate 70, mile marker 253, in western Kansas. My engine was running. My GPS was working, showing my position normally. My phone had full signal. My clock showed 12:47 a.m. on Wednesday, March 14th, 2018. I'd gone back, or forward, or sideways into a version of reality where I'd never descended, where I'd never reached mile marker 0. I sat there for a long moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Had I escaped? Had I broken the loop by going all the way to the bottom and then through it? Or had I just reset back to the beginning, doomed to repeat the whole experience again? Mile marker 252 appeared ahead of me. Real mile marker 252. Not glowing, not malformed, just a standard green sign with white numbers. I passed it at normal speed, my odometer advancing normally. My GPS tracking my position in real time. Mile marker 251. Mile marker 250. I kept driving, watching the numbers count down in the normal way, each marker 1 mile apart, each marker exactly where it should be. No loops, no repetitions, no impossible geometry. I crossed into Colorado just after 3 a.m. and reached Denver by 7:30, right on schedule. I made my delivery, signed the paperwork, and called Jenny to let her know I was okay. "You sound better," she said. "You sounded so strange earlier." "Earlier?" "When you called Tuesday night. You sounded confused, like something was wrong." I'd called Tuesday night. From my perspective, that was 3 days ago. But for her, it was just last night. Time had reset along with everything else. "I'm fine," I told her. "Just tired. I'll be home tomorrow." And I was. I drove home, took a few days off, and went back to work the following week. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Except I never drive through western Kansas anymore. I take alternative routes now, even if they add hours to my trips. And I never, ever drive at night on unfamiliar roads. Because I know the truth. I know what's underneath the highways, what lies in the spaces between mile markers. I know that there are traps built into the roads themselves, places where the normal rules don't apply, where you can drive forever and never reach your destination. I escaped. I think I escaped. But sometimes, late at night, I look at my odometer and wonder if the numbers are advancing at the right rate. Sometimes I check my GPS and wonder if I'm really where it says I am. Sometimes I drive past a mile marker and wonder if I've seen that exact marker before. And sometimes, when my phone rings in the middle of a long drive, I let it go to voicemail. Because I'm afraid that if I answer, I'll hear my own voice on the other end, warning me about something I've already forgotten. I'm home now. I'm safe. I think. But mile marker 0 is always there, always waiting. And roads go both ways. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really came back at all. Or if I'm still sitting at mile marker 0 in that impossible chamber, dreaming that I escaped while my body sits in an empty truck in western Kansas, slowly fading away. The Highway Patrol report said they found my truck at mile marker 253, just like Jenny said. Engine cold, seat deteriorated. No sign of the driver. But I'm here. I'm home. I'm writing this down. Aren't I? The clock on my wall shows 2:33 a.m. It's always 2:33 a.m. now. Always. My name is Archer Hayes. I've been driving trucks for 11 years, and I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what happened. Because, according to every official record, every GPS log, every dispatch system, the trip I'm about to describe never happened. I don't exist in those 12 hours, and I'm not sure I ever really left them. It was September 2020. I was hauling medical supplies from Memphis to Little Rock. Simple route, 3.5 hours on I-40 West. I left Memphis at 6 p.m. on a Thursday. The first 2 hours were normal. I crossed into Arkansas, stopped briefly at a rest area near Forest City, then got back on I-40. The problem started around 8:15. My phone lost signal instantly, full bars to no service in a blink. Then my GPS froze, the screen flickering before going black. My truck's navigation system pixelated and died. Both systems failed at the exact same time. I'd driven this route before. I didn't need GPS. I'd just keep driving west and watch for Little Rock exits. But 10 minutes later, I hadn't seen a single other vehicle. The radio was still working until mid-song. It just cut off. Complete silence. I tried every channel. All showed signal, but produced no sound. Phone, GPS, navigation, radio, all dead. I hadn't seen a road sign in 15 minutes. No mile markers, no exit numbers, nothing. The road just continued, unmarked and featureless into darkness. 20 more minutes passed. Still no sign of Little Rock. I should have been there by now. I tried my phone again. Call failed every time. My odometer showed I'd covered 44 miles since the rest area. I was covering distance, burning fuel. Everything mechanical worked fine, but nothing else made sense. Around 9:30 p.m., when I should have been arriving, I saw something ahead. A car stopped in the right lane, hazard lights blinking slowly. I pulled up behind it. The car appeared empty. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the still night air. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No response. The car's windows were all down. The keys were in the ignition, turned to on. But no one was inside. In the back seat I found a road map. Someone had drawn on it in red pen, marking a section of I-40. No signal zone, avoid. My hands shook. Someone else knew about this. I took the map and got back in my truck. According to it, the zone was only 15 miles long. I'd been driving for over an hour. I should have passed through it already. Unless distance worked differently here. I decided to keep going west and pulled around the abandoned car. Around 10 p.m. I saw lights ahead. Not buildings or vehicles. Points of light hovering above the road. Maybe a dozen of them. Too high for headlights, too low for stars. They hung motionless, forming a corridor across the highway. I slowed to 20 miles per hour. Each light was spherical, glowing soft white blue. I stopped 50 feet away. The lights didn't react. Part of me wanted to turn back, but I needed to get through. I needed to reach Little Rock. I drove slowly forward, passing between them. As I entered, I felt it, like passing through water, brief resistance, then release. The air pressure changed. My ears popped. Temperature dropped suddenly. I could see my breath. Then I was through. The lights were behind me, but something had changed. The darkness was deeper now, thicker. My headlights penetrated less far, and I knew, somehow, that I was no longer on I-40. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have come through. Turn around while you still can." I typed back, "Who is this? Where am I? Doesn't matter who. You're in the gap, the space between mapped routes. Turn around, go back through the lights." I looked in my mirror. The lights were still visible, maybe a quarter-mile back. I typed, "I've been driving for hours. I need to reach Little Rock. How do I get there?" "You don't, not from here. The gap doesn't connect to normal roads. It's a dead branch. A road that got deleted but still exists. Turn around now." A deleted road. That made no sense. I typed, "What happens if I keep going?" "You disappear completely. No record of your trip. No GPS data. No one will know what happened to you. Turn around." I looked ahead, then at the lights behind me. I made a decision and kept driving forward. My phone buzzed. "Bad choice. I tried to warn you. Good luck." Then the phone died. Not low battery, just dead, screen black, unresponsive. The road deteriorated. Pavement cracked, lines faded, shoulders disappeared. It curved slightly now, gentle bends barely noticeable. My fuel gauge showed a quarter tank. I had maybe an hour left. After 20 minutes, I saw tire marks. Dark rubber streaks crossing both lanes. Fresh marks. Someone else had been here recently. But where was their vehicle? Minutes later, I found it. A truck, similar to mine, parked sideways across the road. Windshield cracked from the inside. Something had hit it from within the cab. I got out with my flashlight. The driver's door was ajar. Inside, empty. No driver. No signs of struggle. just a clipboard with paperwork. The shipping date was from 3 years ago, August 2017. This truck had been here for 3 years, but it didn't look old. No rust, no deterioration, like time didn't work here. I backed away quickly and got in my truck. 3 years. Someone had vanished here 3 years ago. Would that be my fate too? I drove around the abandoned truck and kept going. The road crumbled further, forcing me to navigate around broken sections. My odometer showed over 120 miles since Forest City. Impossible. Little Rock was less than 100 miles away. My fuel gauge dipped below a quarter tank. I was running out of time. Ahead, scattered lights appeared. They moved slowly, like fireflies. As I got closer, they paced me, half on each side of the road, following me or hurting me. The road curved sharply right. Suddenly, the landscape opened on my left. In the distance, a massive structure. Dark, angular, silhouetted against the sky. As I drove closer, I saw what it was, a tangle of roads and bridges, twisted together impossibly. Overpasses leading nowhere, on-ramps curving back on themselves, lanes intersecting at wrong angles. A highway interchange, but not logical. Sections of different highways welded together without concern for connection, covered in those lights. Hundreds, maybe thousands, crawling across the twisted metal like insects. This was the gap's heart, where all lost and abandoned roads came together in one vast, meaningless tangle. I drove past it, but could still see it in my mirror, never quite disappearing. The lights crawled across its surface, watching me leave. The road improved, smoother pavement, returned lines. I was moving toward something, an exit. My fuel gauge almost empty. Low fuel warning on. Maybe 15 minutes left. Ahead, a sign. The first in hours. Green highway sign, Little Rock, 0 miles, 0 miles. I was at Little Rock, but there was no city, no buildings, no lights, no off-ramps. Just road continuing into darkness. I passed it and kept driving. Minutes later, another sign. Little Rock, 25 miles. Counting up now, not down. I'd passed through where the city should be without seeing it. My engine sputtered, coughed, died. My truck rolled to a stop. Lights appeared behind me immediately, approaching fast. A pair of headlights, but wrong. Spacing off, angle strange. They pulled up 20 feet back and stopped. I couldn't see what was behind the glare, but I felt it watching. My phone lit up. Text from that unknown number. "Congratulations. You made it through. Now you just have to get back." I typed back, "Get back how? My truck is out of fuel." "Check your gauge." Quarter tank now. Not empty. Enough for an hour. The gap doesn't want you to stop. It wants you to keep moving. As long as you move, it provides what you need. Start your engine. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. Headlights on. I looked in my mirror. The strange truck was gone. I drove. 10 minutes later, I saw the gateway lights ahead, going back through. I accelerated and hit them at 60. That same sensation. Pressure change. Temperature drop. Then I was through. Real I-40. Traffic signs, mile markers, distant lights. I was back. Text. "You're back, but you're not done. Keep driving west, don't stop." Mile markers appeared. 147, 146, 145. West of Little Rock somehow. Traffic around me. Normal vehicles. I'd never been so relieved. My phone had signal. I called my wife. "Archer, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "Arkansas, on I-40, west of Little Rock. I'm okay, just got delayed. Delayed? Your GPS hasn't moved in hours. Shows you stopped east of Little Rock and stayed there. Your dispatcher's been calling. East of Little Rock, where I'd entered. What does it show now? Location unavailable. When did your GPS last update? My dashboard system was still dead. It's been down for hours. Hours? Archer, it's been 12 hours since you left Memphis. Where have you been? 12 hours. I'd lost 12 hours. I couldn't explain. I diverted to Fort Smith, delivered there instead. My dispatcher was confused. My GPS showed me leaving Memphis, then nothing for 12 hours, then suddenly in Fort Smith. GPS malfunction, I said. Must have lost satellite. For 12 hours? That's one hell of a malfunction. I checked my electronic logs later. The entire trip was blank. I departed Memphis at 6 p.m. Thursday. Next entry, arriving Fort Smith at 3 a.m. Friday. 9 hours of driving in a straight line. The actual distance between cities. But I'd lost 12 hours. Those hours in the gap were just gone. Not recorded, not documented. My truck's GPS history, same blank. Phone location history. Showed me driving straight Memphis to Fort Smith on I-40. No deviations. Text. See, you experienced something that officially never happened. You drove a road that doesn't exist. And now you have to live with that. I typed, "Who are you?" I drove through 5 years ago. Got out, like you. But part of me is still there. Part of all of us who've been through it is still there. The gap keeps a peace. What do you mean? You'll find out. When you realize you can't remember the last hour of driving. When your odometer doesn't match. When your GPS shows you in 2 places at once. The gap leaves a mark. That was 3 years ago. I tried to put it behind me. But the mark remained. I'd be driving familiar routes and suddenly realize I had no memory of the last 30 miles. The road would skip. Mile marker 150, then blink. Mile marker 120. No recollection between. Time and distance stopped being reliable. My ELD kept showing gaps. An hour here, 2 hours there. Missing time. I tried local deliveries only. Didn't matter. Even on short trips, I'd lose time. The gap wouldn't let me go. I kept a separate log. In 3 years, I'd lost over 300 hours. Hours that existed in my memory, but nowhere else. 300 hours driving roads, not on any map. Last month, another text. It's getting worse, isn't it? Yes. How do I stop it? You don't. Once the gap has you, it keeps you. But there's something you should know. Others who've been through, we stay in touch. There's many of us. We're starting to understand what the gap is. What is it? A collection point. Where lost roads accumulate. Every rerouted highway, every closed, forgotten road, every route that existed on paper but was never built, they end up there. And when you drive through, you become part of it. So, I'm stuck? One way out, go back, drive through again, but reach the center. That tangle you saw, find your own route in it, sever the connection. Or, get lost permanently, but staying as you are, gradually losing more of yourself. That's not much better. I thought for months. Kept losing hours. Finally, last week, I took a load Memphis to Little Rock. Same route. Left at 6 p.m. Thursday. When my GPS died at 8:15, when my phone lost signal, I didn't panic. I kept driving. When I saw those gateway lights, I drove through. I'm in the gap now. Been here 6 hours according to my watch. Fuel gauge stays at half. Never drops. Ahead, that massive tangle. Bigger than I remembered. More complex. more twisted. I'm driving toward it. Somewhere in there's a road with my name. All the time and distance I've lost. If I find it, if I drive it end to end, I'll sever the connection. Be whole again, or I'll get lost forever. Either way, I'll have an answer. The tangle is getting closer. Overpasses stacked impossibly. On-ramps spiraling into nothing. Lanes merging with themselves. Thousands of lights crawling across it. I'm almost there. I'll write more when I know what happens. If I get out, I'll update this. Let other drivers know there's a way to escape completely. If you're reading this and I never updated it, you know what that means. The tangle is right in front of me now. I can see an entrance. A road leading into the heart of it, disappearing into twisted geometry. I'm going in.